The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. It's Friday, July 6th. It's amazing how fast the year is going. Well, this next 3 hours is going to go pretty fast too. We're going to be with you during that 3 hours live, talking with you about topics having to do with autism and how we can be more effective, more efficient, helping our children on the autism spectrum to reach their fullest potential. I know that if you're a parent, teacher, or practitioner, that is of paramount importance to you. And I know that because it's of paramount importance to me, and I am the mom of a young man who is now 9, who is diagnosed with autism at the age of 2.5. We're going to be talking a lot during the next 3 hours about ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis, because we know that it is the only scientifically proven effective treatment for autism. And I always like to remind you guys that ABA was not created just for autism. It's one of those things that that's a myth. And a lot of people think, oh, this wonderful thing that works with our kids on the spectrum, it was invented for autism. No, this is an age-old science that works on behavior. So anytime we see a behavior that we want to increase or a behavior that we want to decrease, ABA is something that is very effective, no matter if you're on the spectrum or not, no matter if you're 1 year old or you are 101. So the good news about this is that it just happens to also, because it deals with behavior, be efficient and effective working with our kids on the spectrum, and not just some of them, but all of them. So whether you have a child who's very profoundly affected by autism, that you have a lot of skills that you want to give to them, and you have a lot of challenging behaviors that you want to decrease, ABA is going to really be helpful in creating progress. Or if you have somebody on the spectrum who is very quote-unquote high functioning, has great skills, but has some areas of deficit that if they were able to get better at, they could reach new heights. ABA is going to be effective for them, and it's going to be effective for everybody in between. So we talk about ABA a lot. It's a huge, huge area. There's a lot to cover, because if we're talking about behaviors, how many behaviors are there, right? And how many of them are ones that we want to decrease, and how many of behaviors do we have that we'd like to increase? Well, absolutely every skill that your child is not able to do right now, but that you'd like for them to do, almost, I can't think of a single thing off the top of my head that isn't a series of behaviors. So if we apply these tools of ABA in very creative ways that suit the individual child's needs and the individual child's abilities and the individual child's way of learning, we are going to be very, very effective. But there's a lot to talk about. So that's a lot of what we talk about. We will talk about other things as well, but it's completely understandable why that would be the core of what we talk about, because there is so much to cover and it will help us. That's why I am here. Not because I'm an expert in ABA at all. I am not. I am not a board certified behavior analyst. I do not have a degree in psychology. I am not an expert in autism. I want to be abundantly clear about that. I'm a mom who has been through 5 years of intensive ABA with her son, so I'm passionate about this. I'm passionate about helping you to get the information you need and having it be understandable and consumable in the way that you need, because I know what it's like to go, I have to be at OT in 5 minutes and I don't understand, what the expert said to me, and be completely overwhelmed and have the child who's tantruming on the floor and think, okay, seriously, is there no one who can help me here? Well, the truth of the matter is that there are people who can help you, and I want to help hook you up with those people and have them explain to you the information that you need in a way that you can access it and apply it in a very creative way to your child, right? That suits your individual child, and hook you up with the places that you can go to get more help. That's why I'm here. I want to be your conduit to all things that are good. I know what it meant to me to have people help me along the way, because I could not have figured this out on my own. I really couldn't have. And by the way, I don't know anybody who could have. So that's what I want to do for you, is be the BFF who's connected. That I have experts that I can reach out to on your behalf. And please know that I was granted that on your behalf. So put me to work. Tell me what you need to know. Tell me who you want to talk to, what subject you want more about. We had a great interview yesterday with Angela Persicki about toilet training. And if you missed that, I hope you watch it, and I'll tell you how you can watch it later on, because she really covered it A to Z and gave great tips. And we have lots of experts who come on and talk about subjects along those lines. But if there's something that you haven't seen here that you want, there are lots of different ways that you can tell us. So let's get right to how can you be a part of this conversation. If you're watching us right now on autism-live.com, then you will see before you that it says live or rebroadcast. If it says live, that question box that's there, it's active. You can type away in there, hit enter, and it shows up magically right here on my screen so that you and I can be having a conversation, or you can be having a conversation with an expert if we have them in the room, or you can pose a question for me to take to an expert. You can make a suggestion, say these are the kinds of topics I really need covered. Here's what's kicking my can today. Here's what I don't know how to do. Here's what's frustrating about what you're talking about, whatever it is, right? We want to hear from you. And if we're live, you can do that in the question box. You don't have to log in. You don't have to pay anything. It's totally free. You don't have to register and give us your email. All you do is type that question, hit enter, voila, we're having a conversation. Now, if it says rebroadcast, it's a bit different, right? If it says rebroadcast, that question box is not active, but there are still lots of ways that you can get a hold of us. For instance, and Matt's starting to show some of them on the screen for you, you can email us anytime, day or night. I know a lot of you are watching on the opposite side of the earth and everywhere in between, so it's different times of day for you where you are, but you can email us any time of day or night. We'll get your email, we'll cover your question on the next available live show, and we will get a written response back to you. It does take me a little bit of time because I got to run down the expert, get the information, and then I'll either email that off to you. So you got to, it's not instant gratification, but I'm on it as quick as I can. And there are other ways you can get a hold of us too. You can phone into the show. You literally can phone in and be patched into the studio, and we can have a conversation in that way. If we're not live and we aren't in the office, you can leave, even over the weekend, you can leave a voicemail and we'll get back to you when we come into the office. But when we are live, and if you want to be on the show and be talking to us, you can Skype in with us. If we've got an expert sitting here and you want to talk to them, you can via Skype. And we really enjoy it. If you've got a blog that you're writing, we really enjoy having the mom and dad bloggers on the show. If you've got a project, we were featuring all the last couple of weeks Sean Colton's book that he is working on, Legends of the Boo Monster. If you've got a project that you're working on, or a fundraiser, this was one of the things that I put out there the other day, that if you are trying to raise funds for your child because you need to meet that deductible gap, or you're raising money for whatever it is, write in here to me, and we'll arrange, we can Skype in with you, and you can use this forum to tell people about your fundraisers. I would be happy to help you to promote your fundraiser. Thrilled to, in fact. Okay, so lots of different ways you can get a hold of us. You can Facebook us. We have a new page on Facebook, Autism Live. We appreciate all the likes that you guys have been pouring in because we are the new kid on the block. But you can answer the question of the day there. You can also have conversations with other parents. I see you guys support each other on Facebook, and I love that because there are times when you guys will write in and say, I feel like I've got nobody. And I see that a bunch of you will hop on that and say, you are not alone. We are all in this together, and I love that. And other times when you write in and say, I've got something to celebrate today. My child is doing so well. The person who wrote in yesterday in the live forum and said that they're a week and a half into ABA. I love that. And because it's the beginning, right? And the beginning is the hardest part, but saying, I see that it works because they were at a 4th of July thing and the child was playing with their grandfather's dogs and said, I'm going to feed them. A child who doesn't have much language. And the mom started to cry, and a person who didn't know said, you know, what's she so upset about? Because they had no idea that this child has autism. A week and a half in. Woohoo, right? So write in, because we all get inspired by that, right? That makes my day go better, knowing that you guys have good things going on. And when you got stuff that, you know, when it's circling the toilet and you want to write in because you need that support to know that you are not alone and that this too shall pass, write in. We'll prop you up and hold your hand because we have all been there, right? Absolutely. And that is not a fun page to be on. And by the way, you can tweet with us. We really enjoy the things that you guys have been writing in on Twitter, and we really enjoy interacting with you. I'm new to Twitter, so I won't lie to you and say that I'm good at it, but I'm a work in progress. I'm getting better at it. I think it's one of those things I've heard from friends that Twitter, it's like you teeter on it and then you go full on in and become addicted. And I think I'm a little afraid of that. I don't need to be addicted to something else, you know, or tied to something else, but I do enjoy the interaction. So there we go. By the way, I mentioned that there are lots of different ways to watch us. You might be watching us on autism-live.com, but you could also be watching us on blip.tv. We have our own little channel there, and you can go and search topics. I mentioned earlier that we had Angela Persicki on yesterday talking about toileting. You can find that clip there. I don't know if it'll be up today, but probably by Monday it'll be up there because it usually has a day or two lag. We also have our own YouTube channel, so you can go to YouTube and catch up with us there if that's an easier way for you to watch. Love your comments on YouTube as well. You can search topics there. You can pause, rewind, fast forward. Complete shows are there, and small segments with experts and tips on different things that you hopefully will find useful on the YouTube channel. I'm dropping things here. And you can also download us for free on iTunes. We love that we're available on iTunes for you, and we really love and appreciate when you guys give us reviews on iTunes. It actually, when you do that, it actually helps other people find us on iTunes. So it's, you know, double duty wonderfulness when you do that. I'm making that up. And we are also available on Ustream. So that's another way in which you can watch us. Usually right after the live show ends, it replays instantly on Ustream. So on most cases. So all those different ways. If there's a way that you would like to watch us that we didn't list there, then would you do me a favor and let us know? Take advantage of one of those different ways that you can write to us and let us know, because in all likelihood it's that we just don't know about it, and we'd like to serve you in the way that will be the best for you to get this content. That is what we're about, content. Because honestly, very honestly, when I started this journey, I felt so alone, so very alone. And I felt like I really had to, as quickly as possible, find my way. And some of the time I was able to do that efficiently. And I'll tell you, the secret was getting information from other parents who hooked me up with the right experts. That's really what it was. And sometimes I got led down wrong paths because I wasn't listening to parents who were in it and doing it. And I know in the beginning as a mom, I would lay awake and think, what on earth are we going to do? What are we going to do? How are we going to help this child? I brought this life into the earth. I, love this little boy. I am responsible for him. And I felt the weight of that on my shoulders, that I was going to make decisions that were either going to help him or not help him. And it was very important to me to be able to help him. And we got lucky. We met the right people at the right time. They said to us, you are so fortunate that where you live, you're within 30 miles from the headquarters of the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. Call them and get started. And that is what we did. And I'm so glad because we got our child back. My son is in he'll start fourth grade in the fall. And we were told when he was 3 not to count on him ever being in a completely included neurotypical classroom. Well, he was by the time in kindergarten. He was caught up by the time he got to kindergarten, and he excels in school. And, he still has things to work on, but he is a social butterfly. He is talking. We have conversations about things that are deep and meaningful. He knows he wants to work for NASA, has already picked out his office at NASA, and talks about when he goes to college and expresses his thoughts and his feelings to me. Woohoo, right? I mean, there are no words. There are no words to say how lucky and how grateful I am. Was there a whole lot of work from there to here? You betcha. And my child did it, and my husband and I did it, and we, there were days when we sucked it up, and I had my feelings about, everybody else is at Little League, and we're doing this. But you know what? Every single second of it was worth it to get where we are now. So I feel very lucky to have the opportunity to help you. To me, because I got told early on when I said to somebody, what am I ever going to do to repay you for the information that you've given me that made the difference in my son's life? And she said to me, you are going to pay it forward. Well, I get chills when I think about it, because I'm lucky that I get that opportunity to be here. And if you'll take advantage of it, I get to pay it forward. And that to me is like sacred mission, right? Because I remember what it was like there, and I'm not there anymore. And I want to share with you, I want to save you 5 minutes and $5 at the very least. And if we can do more than that, then great. Absolutely great. But even if I can save you 5 minutes and $5, then I get to pay it forward. So take advantage. Let me know what you need and how you need it and when you need it, and I will get on that. Okay? That's my deal with you. All right. We like to start every single morning with something that I fondly refer to as the jargon of the day. Was very adamant when we started this that we had to do something to take on and make friends with the jargon, because this journey is jargon intensive. And you're already overslept, overwhelmed when you come into it, and then people use terms that you don't understand. When you have the wherewithal to say, I don't understand, then they explain it to you using more jargon terms, and then you just want to throw things, right? Right? So we got to start somewhere. Just like with our kids, though, instead of taking on this huge task and being surprised when we're not successful, we got to chunk it down into very, very, very small increments, make it at least a little interesting and accessible, so that we can begin to put together all these terms, because after a while it's all going to start to make sense. You got to be patient with yourself until it makes sense, right? We had a little bit of a bauble today in that our jargon term that's loaded into the machine is not what we had intended, but I don't believe in coincidences. I think that everything happens for a reason. So whoever is out there watching, we must need to clarify this term. This was one that we had earlier in the week, but we're going to do it again, and then I'm going to tell you what the one was supposed to be. But in any case, the term that we have loaded into the machine is, in fact, ABA. And ABA, first we give you our actual definition, and then we're going to give you a working definition, words that we can hopefully understand. Okay, here we go. ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis, and here we go. the application of the principles of learning and motivation from behavior analysis. It employs procedures and technology derived from scientifically demonstrated principles of behavior to increase socially significant behaviors and decrease unwanted or inappropriate behaviors. All right. As definitions go, it is not the worst one, right? This is not as bad as it could be. But how can we condense this down, right, and make it really accessible for us? It's not going to be as exact, but our working definition is a proven method, and it has been scientifically proven, of increasing or teaching desired behavior and reducing unwanted behavior. It really comes down to this, that there are some things that you wish your child was doing more of, and there are other things that you wish your child was doing less of. How do we, and you can very quickly put any behavior into these two categories, right? Don't you wish that your child was talking more? Don't you wish your child was able to make friends more? These are behaviors. We can teach these behaviors. And don't you wish your child was tantruming less? Don't you wish your child was exhibiting less stereotypy, like hand flapping or echolalia, those kinds of things? You want to decrease those things. Don't you wish your child was doing less biting? Well, that's a behavior, and if we apply the tools of ABA, we can decrease the unwanted behavior and increase the desired behavior. That is it in a nutshell. And how do we do this? Well, we look at the behavior and we see behavior in a very scientific way, a three-term contingent, that there is the behavior, right? And I don't know about you, but before I had access to ABA, I was going through my life and thinking that I had some control over other people's actions and behavior. And the truth of the matter is that we really don't. I can sit there and say to my son, don't do that, stop that, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, right? Not effective, but I can sit there and say it over and over and over again. I don't know what I think I'm accomplishing when I do that, but it's, I like to nag. Don't do that. Stop that. Stop that. Don't do that. And it kills me now because I see myself doing this from time to time still, because I'm still learning. And when it's really amazing to me is when I see like a family, a mom in a doctor's office or something, and a child is banging a chair or something, and the mom says, don't do that, right? It just happens. Don't do that. Don't do that. Well, the truth of the matter is the child, maybe they'll stop doing it when you ask them, but it's very hard to physically control somebody's behavior. What are you going to do? You're going to go over and grab the leg and hold on to it forever and say you can't bang the chair anymore? You don't have a great deal of control unless the person is willing to do what you ask them to do, right? So it's then when you think that, you think, oh my gosh, there's nothing I can do, which is a lot of times what we as parents feel like when our child is engaging in behaviors. We see the child doing this and we go, there's nothing I can do. This is the autism. My life, they're a victim of this. I'm a victim of this. There's nothing we can do. But it's not the truth. We just got to start to look at things in a different way. So we have the behavior, right? The behavior is happening, and we have to acknowledge that we don't have a great deal of control over actual behavior. But guess what? There's something that happens before the behavior. We call that the antecedent. Something is happening before the behavior that is in some way triggering this behavior. We have a lot of control over what happens before the behavior. We really do, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But then even more interesting is that when the behavior starts to happen, there is a consequence for the behavior, always. All behavior. There is a consequence for the behavior, and guess what? As parents and as teachers, we have almost ultimate control over the consequences. And if we monkey a little bit with the antecedent or we monkey a little bit with the consequence, it has direct impact on that behavior, and we can change behavior by not saying, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, but changing the antecedent and changing the consequence. And then we see amazing things. So that's how we're going to look at things, as a behavior, an antecedent, something that happened before the behavior, and a consequence. The example that I always like to use because it's crystal clear to me, stop and think about this, because everything you do in your life is behavior, right? And there are some behaviors that you do over and over and over again. The behaviors that you do over and over and over again, you do because they are in some way reinforcing. So every day, and you don't even think about it, but every day at some point, you are in your home and the light starts to shift enough that you stop doing what you're doing and you walk over to the light switch and you turn it on. Okay, why? Because you couldn't see anymore. But if we take this apart and look at it as that three-term contingent, the behavior is that you walked over to the light switch and flicked on the light switch. The antecedent was that you got uncomfortable enough that you couldn't see, and the consequence was that light flooded the room. And because you were successful at changing what was happening, you're going to do that over and over and over again, and you don't even think about it. I always say when you move, you know how it's that funny thing where, you walk into a room and you don't know where the light switch is. I never feel like I'm home until I can automatically reach and find the light switch without thinking about it, right? And we do every single day. There comes, and if you think about it, what was the moment yesterday when you turned on the lights in your house? Because almost always you're in a room and the light changes and you've got to get up and do the light switch. So at what point did that happen for you yesterday? You probably can't even remember it because it's just so ingrained. It's something you do over and over and over again because you're used to getting the reward of the light switch coming on. I know that there's a television show that's starting in the fall that's about the power going off all over Earth forever. Imagine if our power, and I know a lot of you on the East Coast, when you're watching this later on, because you have no power today, because of all the storms and things going on, you got no power. But I'm going to guess that you kept going back to the light switch and turning it on, expecting that you were going to get that response and the light was going to come on, right? How many times have you walked over time and gone, oh, right, the power is off? Well, imagine that if this were to continue endlessly, a time would come when you would stop going over to do the power, right? So what we want to do for our children is cut off this power supply to behaviors that we don't want to see more of. If a child, when children are born, they cry and they get the bottle, right? We plug them in. Or they get a pacifier, or they get something, or they get mom's milk, right? They get plugged in, or they get picked up and they get bounced. They get attention. They get something when they cry. And then when they're 2, they start into the terrible 2s of acquiring language, if this is a typically developing child. And in those terrible 2s, they have to make the shift from, I'm no longer going to cry to get what I want. I'm going to use language, and it's going to be easier than crying. I don't have to get upset. I'm going to use language. But for our kids, they don't acquire the language in the typical way, so they continue to tantrum, right? Because that's the way that they get their power supply. Tantrum has worked for years. For 2 years, I've cried and they have fed me. For 2 years, I have cried and they gave me attention. Why would I do something different? So we're going to cut off the power supply, give them a different thing to do to get their needs met. We're going to help them to acquire language. We're going to change the way things go. This is what ABA does. Now, what our jargon was supposed to be this morning was a manned frame. We talked about manding earlier this week. Manding is when our children request things, and we'll see at the top of the next hour when we talk, when we show the A word, following the little boy Jack Riley who has autism. We'll see that in the beginning, when he was manding, they were teaching him to do was to say cookie. If he said cookie, and actually he wasn't even saying cookie, he was saying googie, right? And they would give him the cookie because they're teaching him, hey, this is the reinforcement you're going to get. This is the consequence. When you do that, you get a cookie. Whoo! It's a good thing, right? And over time, he was saying cookie clearer, and then they were teaching him to say more cookie, and then they taught him to say, I want a cookie, and now they're teaching him to say, can I have a cookie? So a manned frame is when we take not just the manned, but we put it together with other words, right? So that it creates that full sentence. That was what our jargon was supposed to be, but I firmly believe we were supposed to do ABA. So Okay. We always have a question of the day for you, too. And the question of the day, we hope that you will participate and let us know what you're thinking. Sometimes it's just for fun, and other times it's for us to educate each other about what's happening. But it's a holiday week, right? And so I want you to dream a little bit. What is your dream vacation? And I know it's probably out of reach right now because you've got other things to deal with, you've got other autism bills, but I gotta tell you that it's not always gonna be that way. It isn't. I know this for a fact. And when I was in the middle of ABA, I just thought, well, that happens for other people. It's not going to happen for us. And we are still not at a place where we're ready to take our dream vacations. But it's good to know what your dream vacation is. We always want to be working towards something, right? We have to have something fairly immediately reinforcing, and we have to have something to look forward to down the line. And it's interesting that I think when we were in ABA, my husband and I would have said different things than we say now, but just recently we were talking, and I've been doing a lot of family genealogy. I always thought with the name Shannon, and it's a family name, a last name from our family, that I was Irish. I just, and I am a little bit Irish, a very, very little bit Irish, but it turns out that I am much more Scottish than I am Irish, and that my husband is too. So we have recently started this dream of that we want to go to Scotland. We want to go to Scotland and see some of the castles that our ancestors, that's what it is, right? Ancestors built, and have that vacation. And it's something that our whole family is starting to think of. Now, it might be another 10 years before we get there, but I gotta tell you, it makes me happy. It makes me feel good, puts a little skip in my walk that at some point we're going to Scotland. And I go back to a couple of weeks ago, there was a huge lottery, and people were talking about it and saying, oh, your odds of winning. And I said, well, I'm gonna spend $10 on lottery tickets. Supposedly it goes towards education. I don't know, but that's the rumor. And I said, I'm gonna spend the $10 on the lottery ticket because I'm going to get a good 24 hours of getting to daydream about what it would be like to have $500 million. And, we spend $10 to go to see a movie. And that's for 2.5 hours if we're lucky. And I got 24 hours of pleasure from that $10 thinking about, man, if I had $500 million, what would I do with it? So take a minute today. We talked about meditation earlier this week. Take a minute today to think about, if money were no object and autism were no object and time were no object, what would be the dream vacation? The truth is, you can take a little mental vacation for just a minute and it will put a smile on your face. And those little mental vacations of 30 seconds here and a minute there, sometimes it makes the difference in getting through the day, doesn't it? So I'd love to hear from you, though. What's your dream vacation? Maybe that some of you are watching in Scotland and your dream vacation is to come to Los Angeles. We could trade, because it's my dream vacation to come where you are. In any case, love to hear from you on Facebook today. We'll check in later on to hear what your dream vacations are. We always have a topic of the day. The topic of the day has kind of turned into the topic of the week, and if you can't guess already, it is teaching language. How do we teach language to our kids to help them to reach their fullest potential? And by the way, language encompasses a lot of different things. We're not necessarily just talking about vocal language. Of course, we all want for our kids to be vocal. I think every parent on the face of the planet has that expectation when their child is born, and of course that's what we want. We know that that is not the reality for all of our kids, that sometimes they have extenuating circumstances which are going to make speech not possible. But that does not mean that functional communication is not possible. And we want to be as effective and as efficient as teaching that functional language as we possibly can. Because ultimately, we all want for our children to be able to communicate with us and for us to communicate with them. And we know that that's possible. So we're going to be talking about teaching language throughout the day and through some of the different things that we talk about. We got a lot of different things planned for you today. We have an academic tip for you. We have a social tip. We have an executive functions tip. We've had a lot of guests in the last 2 weeks and haven't gotten to some of our core areas of things that we like to talk about. We're going to get to do that today. And we have the myth of the day for you. So lots to talk about, all of which we will put to the side if you have questions that you write in with. It's Friday. What do you want to know? I'll chase it down for you. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to do our executive functions tip of the week about attention. So stick with us.
Skills is a revolutionary web-based program that incorporates comprehensive assessment, curriculum design, progress tracking, and treatment evaluation for children with autism all in one place. Developed by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. Our approach is based on over 40 years of research on the principles of learning and their application to improving the lives of children with autism. How does Skills work? Created with speed and simplicity in mind, Skills was modeled on an easy 3-step process. Step 1. Start assessment. Step 1 begins with our intelligent assessment system, which consists of a series of questions. This assessment is essential to identifying your child's level of skills compared to their typical peers across all areas of development. This includes assessing social, motor, language, adaptive, play, cognition, executive functions, and academic skills. Every skill has an assigned age which indicates when the skill emerges during typical development. This means that each child is automatically presented only with lessons that are relevant to his or her age. Step 2. Choosing activities. It's now easier than ever to build an individualized treatment plan. In Step 2, you are presented with an individualized pool of activities that are directly linked to your student's assessment results. Each activity represents a specific skill that has been indicated by the assessment as needing to be taught. Activities are categorized by curriculum and then by lesson. There are 3 main types of skills: building blocks, fundamental, and expansion skills. Fundamental skills are necessary for successful everyday functioning. Building blocks are prerequisites to a fundamental skill. Expansion skills are non-essential skills, but may provide further enrichment in certain areas. After reviewing the activities available to you, you can quickly add your chosen activities to the treatment plan by simply checking the box and clicking the button. Step 3. Start treatment. Once you have selected and added the activities you want, you are ready to begin teaching. Skills provides you with all the tools necessary to design and manage an effective curriculum plan, such as printable activity guides that are customizable by the teacher, supplemental teaching aids including printable data sheets, teaching guides, visual aids, worksheets, and tracking forms, detailed IEP goals and benchmarks for each activity, brief and visually appealing video tutorials, a variety of treatment progress and clinical timeline charts, and lots more. And since Skills is completely web-based, everything you need is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in one easy-to-access location. Skills users even benefit from unlimited access to a support community, where they can ask questions and share ideas with a skills expert. Skills is always with you.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I am so busy talking and doing other things that I'm not paying attention here. And I have something that I want to put up here because I want to talk a little bit about executive functions. This is something that we haven't had a chance to talk about for at least a week, and it's one of my favorite things to talk about. So forgive me while I look for it. There it is. Okay. And the executive functions, and this is my understanding, which I had a much different understanding. As a former teacher, when we talk about executive functions within a classroom, I was looking at it in one way. But when we're talking about our kids with autism, imagine being able to put together, because a lot of times we segment and we say, okay, I'm going to teach this skill, and then I'm going to teach this skill, and I'm going to teach this skill, and then we chain them together, right, to make a bigger skill. Well, imagine, and then we got all these bigger skills, right? But imagine that there's that missing puzzle piece of being able to put all of the skills that we've learned together to accomplish a goal. And it can be a smaller goal. Like, let's say, for instance, the goal is being able to get yourself up and ready in the morning and get to school on time. Right? Which is a pretty, like, if you were to segment that down and go, okay, what all does that entail, right? It means that you got to get up at a certain time. You have to not pay attention to certain things that are going to potentially make you late. You have to know how to take care of your personal grooming. You have to have been able to do adaptive goals, to have done the laundry and folded the laundry so that you, and know where to find the laundry so that you can put it on, right? You got to be able to dress yourself. You have to be able to tie your shoes. You have to be able to think through and say, okay, what is the weather like? So what am I going to wear? You know, do I have gym today? Do I have to have a certain period? You got to think through a whole bunch of things. Then you have to be able to eat something so that you're not going to peter out on energy at mid-morning. I mean, they're just literally hundreds of things that you have to think through, and hundreds of little itty-bitty skills that you need to chain together to be able to get yourself ready and out the door and at school on time. Right? And imagine, you know, and I was saying, well, that's a small goal, to be ready at school on one day, right? But we want to be ready and at school every day. And imagine that over time, we have even bigger skills that we want to do. Like for the child who says, well, you know, I want to go to college. Well, think about all of the little skills that have to be done from now until whatever age the child goes to college in order to be ready. And think about for ourselves all the things that we do, goals that we have, and what we ultimately want to be successful at, and all the different things that are going to have to happen, all the problem-solving skills, all the ability to look at things and say what I'm doing is working, and if it is working, you know, how do I want to further, and if it's not working, how do I want to change it without giving up, perseverance. It's a lot. And what I love in the skills program, and I've talked to you guys about this before, Skills is a wonderful online tool that I personally use. I can't even tell you how much I love this. And I use this at home with my son. It's the same lessons. It's the same curriculum that my son was getting when he was getting full services from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. He doesn't need all of that anymore, but there are still little individual things that he needs to work on that I'm working on with him at home using the skills program. And you know, a lot of what we do anymore, because he's doing so well that the things that we are typically working on, there's a little bit still from the motor skills, but we mostly are working in executive functions, cognition, and the social skills arena, because that's where he still is needing some support. And those tend to be the more, of course, they start when children are really little, but they go up to these really complex skills that adults really could benefit from. And when I had the opportunity to sit down and read through the executive functions curriculum and skills, because my son hadn't gone through all of it, I wasn't familiar with all, I was familiar with some of it, but I sat and read through it and I went, oh my gosh, I need this. Like, there are things in here that I would like to be able to do, because I could see very clearly that if I could, I was going to be more productive. I was going to be a better parent. I was going to be a better teacher. I was going to be a better show host. Now I'm working on them. I don't have them figured out completely. I don't have the skill. I'm not proficient at all of them. But I'm working on them and trying to make it reinforcing for myself to think, even as small of a thing as, and I got to be honest with you, that like I get so caught up in my life that sometimes I don't think, but thinking, because it had been a lot of years since I had worked outside the home. Because when my son was doing autism therapy, I was at home, working at home. So having to think through that on Sunday afternoons, if I would go and get gas and fill my tank on Sunday afternoon, that my entire week would go better. The entire week would be so much better if I would just think to myself when I was out running errands on Sunday afternoon to fill the tank. Now, once that occurred to me, I went, wow, what a small thing, little behavior, but it sets me up for success during the week. But it honestly hadn't occurred to me, and I'm reading through the executive functions curriculum and going, I feel so harried in the morning, and Mondays are so difficult, and or whatever day that I have to go and get gas. Oh, well, I don't have to do that. And applying the rules of now that's me personally, and you might think, well, Shannon, that's just so silly. I would have thought of that, but I guarantee you that if you were to look at an area in your life that isn't working, and apply the lessons of executive functions, you would see that there is something that is constantly tripping you up, that if you could take care of that one element, and if you problem solve and pay attention to it and really focus on it, you could fix that and find that everything else went much better and you were that much more successful. It's brilliant. Can I overstate it? I don't think so. And honestly, as a teacher, I look at this and I think, really, every single junior high school student in the world should be treated to this curriculum, because you know what? They would be so much more successful. I can remember when I would teach, and you give homework, and kids could do like maybe they were good at doing the homework and they were good at paying attention in the afternoon and saying, I need to plan accordingly because I know the homework is due on this day, which means I got to work a little bit on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday to hand it in on Thursday. Some kids were great at that, but they would arrive on Thursday and because they didn't know how to pack their backpack, the paper was all crumpled, and their, drink for their lunch had dribbled all over it, and it was useless. And now you got a child who said, I did the work, but you can't really see it, right? And they're all discouraged and feeling like it wasn't worth anything. So now they're less likely to do the homework, right? And the flip would be true of other kids. There were other kids who just couldn't organize themselves to say, I got to do a little on Monday, I got to do a little on Tuesday, I got to do a little on Wednesday. So on Thursday morning, they're sitting there really, doing a not good job because they didn't know how to plan. And everything in between. The few numbers of kids who in junior high and in high school who can actually get it together on their own without a lot of parent support. It's really a small number of kids who can do that on their own. And I used to teach college too, and so to see those kids who the parents, every night, no, you got to sit down, and we're on their kids and really, had done their job, executive functions, to be able to plan accordingly so that the child was, and of course the parents are thinking, well, if we do this often enough, then the child will build these good skills and these good habits, right? But then the child gets to college, and without anybody constantly, they don't know how to do it on their own. This curriculum is brilliant for all of that. I really encourage you. Skills has a wonderful summer thing right now that if you buy 1 month, you get the rest of the summer for free. So I encourage you to get it for your kids and then check out the executive functions for yourself, and keep it in mind. If you've got teenagers, I don't care, not on the spectrum, brilliant. Just brilliant. Or if there's something that you're not achieving in life that you want to achieve, this curriculum. I remember reading through it and going, oh my gosh, this is like the best business training. This is like a personal life coach right here. So, all right, that's my excitement about the executive functions. I really do think it's part of the missing puzzle piece, though, for autism, stringing it all together. You can teach all these skills to your child, but until they can put them together to achieve a goal that's meaningful to them, we really haven't finished the job. And by the way, you're not going to find these lessons anyplace else. This is cutting edge stuff that CARD has been doing and researching for 20 years, and nobody else has this. So really, really amazing. But I want to talk about, because within the executive functions curriculum, I'm just, I don't normally show this, but I want to show this, Matt. There are lots of different areas, and you'll see these bumped down in here. We've got attention, inhibition, planning, problem solving, flexibility, memory, and metacognition. So these are the different domain areas within the executive functions curriculum. But what I want to focus on today is attention, because this is something we can start with very, very small children. And when you think about it, achieving any goal, it is a cornerstone piece of it is what you pay attention to, what you don't pay attention to, right? And how you can use your attention to its fullest so that you can reach your fullest potential. So I want to go through some of the different areas of, and it's going to show it to me here. I know it is, if I'm just patient enough. There are all the different kinds of attention that you see there. There's stimulus orienting, disengagement, shifting attention, sustained attention, divided attention, determining saliency, summarizing, and paraphrasing. Right? Like, would you have thought that there were that many different areas of attention? And this is why skills is so important, because you don't have to think this through. Lessons are there, and you take the assessment, and it tells you what area you need to start in to be successful for your child. You still get to decide and make decisions, but it will say to you, it will say, here are the lessons your child needs to do, and they're numbered so you can see, okay, this is the prerequisite for this. So think about this. The very youngest children, babies, 3-month-old babies, can they focus on one thing? Can they focus their eyes on something and pay attention to one thing? So you've got the rattle and you're doing this, and the baby looks at it and can orient themselves to some kind of stimulus. As they grow, this is going to develop to the point where, you know, the dog barks out there and the child shifts to look at the noise. That's stimulus orienting. I heard something and I turned my head. Now, for some of our kids, that didn't happen. For others, they did it for a while and then that skill deteriorated, right? But it's a key important thing that our children notice something, whether it's visual or it's something that they're hearing, that they turn to it and focus their attention. And we can teach this to children, and all we have to do is create these environments in which we have something happen, we encourage them and prompt them to do it, and then we reward them for it. And if we make it rewarding enough, the child will do it again and again and again. So stimulus orienting, disengagement, being able to stop looking at one thing to focus on another thing. Think about, and disengagement, it's one of those things that it starts very early too, but it's something that goes throughout life. I think about my son right now, and one of the biggest problems we're having, a great deal of time was spent last night reconfiguring our lives for the summer, is that my son right now is having a really hard time disengaging from a very preferred activity, otherwise known as video games. And I'm just getting some lip that I am not happy with when he has to stop playing a video game. So we kind of have to go back to basics and build a different expectation. And I'm going to have to, for a little while, I don't want it to become a battle, right? I'm not interested in having a battle. I want it to be reinforcing for him to disengage, which means that I'm going to have to backtrack a little bit and find things that are more reinforcing. Ooh, this is a task, right? More reinforcing than the video game, to say, you know, I'm going to give you 30 seconds. We're going to turn off the video game so that we can go do something that's more reinforcing the video game, reinforce him with that, praise him with that, fade that out so that we don't have a problem with disengagement. Our bad, because he just has had a little too much time to play video games. But I want that disengagement because when they go to school, right, they have to leave one thing and leave another thing. This is a problem, not just for our kids. I personally have a problem with disengagement. If I'm doing something, I was talking with our fill-in technical director for this week, Matt, the other day, and I used to edit things, and I would get so engrossed in what I was editing that I wouldn't want to talk to somebody else and I wouldn't want to stop. Right? It was really hard for me to disengage. And if I did disengage and say, okay, it's time to go eat something, it was hard for me to get back in. So I didn't want to disengage. But it is a skill like anything else. And we can, if we are willing to, and if we make it worthwhile, we can strengthen it so that it is not that, jumping into a cold pool, to disengage your attention from one thing to put it on another thing. We can do that. Shifting attention. This is so important for school because we need to be able to shift our attention from one thing to another thing and back again, like watching a tennis match, right? This can be really difficult for our children. Honestly, it can be difficult for a lot of people. When I was editing, not only was it hard for me to disengage to go do something else, but it was difficult if somebody came and asked me a question, it was hard for me to answer their question and come right back. Right? It's hard sometimes, but we can strengthen this and think how much more productive you could be if this was a good skill that you possessed, and then think, wow, if I gave this to my child, what kind of a gift would it be? Sustained attention. It's probably written into your child's IEP how long they have an expectation that they want your child to sit and watch something. It's interesting because some of our kids are really good at this. In fact, they are so good at it that they have trouble disengaging, right? I could set my son down and have him play with Legos, and he could play with Legos for an hour and have no problem and sustain his attention there. His problem was disengaging. For other kids, they can disengage and flip from one thing to another, but they can't sustain their attention. And you see how important it is that we don't look at all of our kids the same way, that we not approach this with a cookie cutter and give them all the same lessons. We have to strengthen in our kids the pieces that they do not have strongly or at all. Divided attention, determining, when we get into the older ones here, divided attention, determining saliency, summarizing, paraphrasing, divided attention, literally doing more than one thing at a time. And more, we're all being expected to do 5 things at the same time. You're expected to be able to text somebody while having a conversation with somebody else while cooking a meal, right? I don't know how we're all expected to do as well as we are. And I'm surprised that more of us have not had nervous breakdowns. But imagine what it's like for our kids when they've got all these sensory things going on and they're being asked to do 3 things at the same time. But we can strengthen this skill. Then when we get into determining saliency, summarizing, and paraphrasing, obviously these are things that are much older than a baby, right? But determining saliency, once we get children into conversation mode, that's quite the prerequisite. And they're telling us about an event. We want them to be able to pick out what the main ideas are and tell us those things. How many times have we had the experience with a child on the spectrum who is vocal, who's telling the story and says, there was a bear. And you go, there was a bear. Where was the bear? Is this in a story? Was this at school? Where did this happen? And then they start telling you other things, and it turns out that there was a bear in a story that was being told when the firemen came to visit, but they're not telling you that firemen came to the school. Like, that would be the most salient part of the story, right? Instead, they tell you there was a bear in the story that this teacher was reading when the firemen got there. We need for our kids to understand, well, that's the important piece of information that you needed to tell me, and you need to lead with that. We all have somebody in our lives, right, that we say, you got to get your headlines right here. Like when somebody calls you and says, we're at the hospital and, there was a car accident and there were all these different things, and you're saying, is everybody okay? Because you want them to lead with that, right? So determining saliency so that they can give information, summarizing, being able to condense all of the information into one quick thing to be able to say, here is what the core of it is. We work on this now when we go to see movies. We went to see Brave the other day, and I said, so afterwards we went to lunch, and I said, so what was that movie about? And my son was able to condense it down and summarize. Paraphrasing, very different, because if I say, I want you to go over and put on your shoes and I want you to do it in 10 seconds, I want to know that he can tell me without using my words verbatim, what is it I want you to do? Well, you want me to, finish getting ready so that we can go and you're in a hurry. That's paraphrasing. Vastly different than summarizing. And some of our kids can summarize, but they can't paraphrase. Other kids can paraphrase, they can't summarize. So we want to give our kids these skills. This is all attention. What do you pay attention to? And how do you focus your attention? Later on, in the next domain, it's inhibition. So what do you inhibit? Vocal responses that you inhibit, but also inhibiting what you want to pay attention to. So for the child who is engaging in stereotypy because the light is flickering and it's making them crazy, so when they do this, it makes it so that the light flickering doesn't bother them. That's not the only reason why kids flap, but for some kids it is. Being able to separate and say, I'm not going to pay attention to that. We've all experienced that, right? You've been in the room, you're having to fill out a piece of paper that's really important, and you hear the clock ticking, tick, 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 right? And we're able to hopefully shut our brain to that and say, it's still there, but I'm not focusing on it. So you can see how teaching these different things can lead to really amazing ability. And if you put all of the different domains together in executive functions, what you get is somebody who is able to make decisions and meet deadlines and create goals for themselves and achieve them. Oh my gosh, it's exciting, very exciting. Okay, so that's just a piece of the executive functions, how important attention is. I hope you will check out skills, but it is time now to show the A word. This is that wonderful documentary that's being made at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders following a little boy, Jack Riley, who is, he was diagnosed at the age of 2, but in this particular episode, he's turning 3. And we're going to see, we talked about those man frames, we're going to see how he's growing his language from just requesting to now saying, can I have fill in the blank, right? And how that language is growing. He's tacting and he's manding, and they're getting to interverbals, which was our jargon yesterday. So take a look at what's happening with Jack Riley. This is the A word.
Sun's coming up.
How do you spell apple?
A-P-P-L-E.
We went to the mall last night and got him some new shoes, and he rode the carousel, and I watched him for like a half hour, and you would never guess he wasn't like every other kid in there, except he was smaller than a lot of them. They run around with
That's so funny.
reckless abandon.
So funny.
That's so funny.
Hey, what color do you want? Look, I have green, yellow, and pink. What color?
Yellow.
So what do you say?
Yellow.
Yes, you can. Close. There we go. Oh! Uh-oh! Should we make him stand? Should we make him jump? Here, let's make him jump. Ready? Boink! Uh-oh! Look, what is that? See, it's a footprint.
It's a footprint.
It's a footprint. Cool, you want to do it again?
Take it.
While Jessica and Jack Riley are playing with Play-Doh, they are working on his fine motor skills. They include pincher grasp for picking up food, rotating the wrist for closing and opening the door. Having fine motor skills are needed for daily living tasks.
Oh, coolness.
birthday.
Happy birthday! Whose birthday is it? Say it's my
It's my
birth.
day.
Say birthday. Say
Birthday. It's my birthday. It's my birthday.
Yeah. How old are you?
It's my.
I'm.
I 3.
Yep. You're 3. Do this. Say 3.
3.
1, 2. Look. 3 fingers. Look. Right here. Look. 1, 2,
3.
3. 3 fingers.
5 fingers.
Yeah, well, yeah, technically you do have 5. What is that?
I love it.
He's wearing a blue
Hat.
and a
Green.
hat and a
Red hat.
hat and a. Oops! He's not wearing a hat.
Yellow hat.
Yeah, it's a yellow hat. Red.
Red shirt. Blue shirt. Yellow shirt. Green shirt.
Yeah, oops! He's wearing it upside down. It's
It's a hippo and dog.
good. It's
It's a rabbit and frog.
good.
It's a pig and cow.
Very good.
I have a question for you. Why is tacting important?
Tacting is important because it helps with language and conversation too. When we first start off, we just have him identify labels.
It's a ladybug.
And then we move into frames, like adding article adjectives to it, like it's the dog. What is it? Say it's. Yeah, it's a chicken. And then now we're having him add 2 objects. So he has to say it's a blank and a blank.
It's a pig and cow.
Very good. And then we'll move on to like add adjectives in front of the words too. So like what he does already, he'll say like it's purple socks, it's a red shirt.
Yellow suit. Blue suit. Red suit.
Just to help expand his language skills a lot more. Let's go, Jack Riley. You want to copy Susan? That's hilarious. That's so funny. You guys are so funny. Look at you guys. Are we buddies? Are we twins? Here, give me your hand. You guys are so funny. What are you doing, Jack? Are we sitting? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you are thirsty.
Let's get you some water.
So cute. You even brought the chair over and everything. Funny. Come on, let's get some milk, Jack. Say, come on, Suzanne.
Close yourself.
Okay, let's go.
You are
Cover.
too much laughing and giggling in here. That's a good thing.
Welcome back. That was the A word, and I love this series because it demonstrates for us how much progress can be made with our kids in a very relatively short period of time. I'm sure to the family it feels like they've been doing this forever. At this point, they're about 7-8 months into ABA therapy, which is a long time, right? But the expectation is that we really need to be able to devote between 2 to 4, and for my son it was 5 years. Now the 5th year was not as many hours, right? But it was a lot of time, a lot of time. Worth it. Totally worth it. And we get to see why it's worth it when we see that how much progress he's making. You know, what's funny about it is that as a parent, you know, when your child makes progress, you kind of tend to, and I know I'm not the only one because I've talked to other parents that, and it may not be everybody, but the parents I've talked to agree that it's like this for them, that, you know, your child makes progress and you're desperate for your child to do something, then they make that progress, and there's a little blip where you're so grateful, so happy, but you're on to the next thing. So that sometimes you don't notice cumulatively how much your child has changed until a milestone comes along, or somebody who hasn't seen your child in a while and they say, oh my gosh. And you have to stop for a second and think, oh, that's right. We think of how far we have come. It's absolutely amazing. And we get to see, we get treated on a weekly basis to see how far this child is coming. I know it's different for the parents. For example, in an early episode, we saw Jack Riley having a problem with compliance, and ultimately what we discovered in the watching the video is that what he wanted, they were asking him to sit and do a skill, and he threw a tantrum, and they couldn't quite figure out, they're looking at, all right, what was the antecedent? Why is this happening? What's the consequence? They're trying to contain it. And as soon as he did the task, and eventually he complied and did the task, and as soon as he was done, he walked and got underneath the dining room table so he could take a poo. And the mom was emotional afterwards and sat there and cried and said, I feel so bad. We were asking him to do something, and we know that it's important that he do this skill, but all he wanted was to go and take a poo, which is a very human thing, and he didn't have the words to tell us. He couldn't just say, you know what, give me a minute, I need a poo. And she said, I just feel so bad because we didn't know and he can't tell us. And she said, I just hope that someday soon he'll be able to say, I need a minute, I need to poo. And what a funny thing to wish for, but it really makes a difference in his life. And he just went through a half an hour of needing this and us not knowing it and us putting demands on him, and he was frustrated because he couldn't say it. And she said, I just, I hope that someday my child is able to say that. And in last week's episode, that's exactly what he did. They were asking him to do something and he was having a rough time, and they were asking him to come out of the hallway, and he goes, I'm pooping. Right? I need a minute. I'm pooping in the hallway. He's not yet working on potty training. But it was this brilliant sort of moment, and I found myself thinking, gosh, I wonder if the mom took a second to go, wow, 4 months ago, my entire being, I cried over the fact that he couldn't say this, and today he's saying it. I hope she took a minute to recognize that and go, wow, that was 4 months ago. Where can we be 4 months from now? But a lot of times you don't. A lot of times you don't because you're caught up in the day and they got a brand new baby, and it reminds all of us how much progress can be made and how it becomes a part of our day. You get used to this kind of progress. But we really are seeing a great explosion of language in this little boy, but even more than that, we're seeing his attention shift, that he is interested in people instead of objects now. He looks different. You know how a lot of times you look at pictures of kids with autism and, there might have been a picture before they regressed into autism where it's the lights are on and the kid is present, and then there's the pictures where it's like somebody either dimmed the light down or turned it off. Oh, it just kills me when I see those pictures, not just of my child, but of other people's children. You just go, oh. But I feel like somebody has turned the lights back on for Jack Riley, that he looks at you and he's there, and he does look at you. He's got that eye contact going on. But did you notice the executive function skills right there in the last minute of the video? That the filmmaker is kind of sitting there on the windowsill and, hanging out and watching the situation. And the therapist is running the camera for a minute because they do trade off sometimes. And this little boy clearly has a little bit of a crush on the filmmaker, which I think is very, very sweet. First he was really into her camera, and now he's really into her. Well, that in and of itself is real progress. But did you notice, here's this little boy who sees her sitting on the windowsill, and what does he want? He's like, I want to sit next to her. Well, he's not tall enough to reach the windowsill. So did you see what he did? He went and he got himself a chair, and he went over and put it up against the wall, and he crawled up on the chair so that he could sit up on the windowsill. Now that is some executive functions going on there. He saw what he wanted, he had a goal, and he thought, all right, what am I going to do? I can't get up there, so how am I going to problem solve this? And he went and carried it out. And we were watching him. I had no idea what he was doing the first time I watched. I was like, what is he getting the chair for, right? But he had a goal and he was going to succeed. That is lovely. And you know what? For a lot of our kids with autism, those kinds of things don't come easily. So the fact that he's doing this on his 3rd birthday is spectacular. Really, really wonderful. Got some executive functions going on. Okay, we have to take a little bit of a break. When we come back, we are going to address the question of the day. Where do you want to take your dream vacation? If you haven't already written in on Facebook, please do so. or email us or tweet us or call us or Skype us or whatever you want to do, because we're going to be talking dream vacations when we come back. Stick with us.
I'm Adele Nadowski, Director and Co-Creator of Skills. CARD e-learning is an online tool that has been developed by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. CARD e-learning is the training that is delivered to the ABA therapists at CARD to train them on the principles of applied behavior analysis and to equip them with the knowledge they need to essentially deliver the ABA-based techniques during their therapy with the children that they work with. ABA has been proven scientifically to be the most effective intervention for children with autism. At this point, even the Surgeon General has come out with a statement suggesting just that. So we know that this is something that children with autism definitely need if they're going to improve and live the lives that we're hoping that they're going to be able to live. By being able to train people on this one particular method that we know works, and to be able to have all of your staff within your school settings on the same page, it allows you to take more of a multidisciplinary approach, and there's definite consistency going on within the team. It makes sure that every person involved with that child's treatment program, including the speech and language pathologist, the occupational therapist, the teachers, the aides, all of these individuals to be able to be trained so that they can all work together effectively with the child. Parents that are using CARD e-learning can use it either to train themselves, and then after having done that they can implement different techniques with their child in order to teach new skills. But oftentimes parents might also be working either with an ABA provider, with a school, or they may have even hired their own therapist to deliver the intervention techniques. So CARD e-learning can be used either to collaborate with your school. It can also be used to train the therapists that are coming to the home of the parents, or it can also be shared with the ABA provider so that that provider can find out about it and perhaps implement it within their organization and train their staff. You can also do reporting for your organization. So you can actually look and find out which teachers are progressing, what their quiz scores are, and actually we can give you reports as well that will help you to compare the different teachers and their performances. CARD e-learning is really simple to use. You can log on to this as long as you have a computer, that's all you need, and an internet connection. And you can work on it any time of the day, anywhere that you're at. When you log on, you realize that right away. First of all, on the top of the page, there's a navigational tutorial. It's a how to use this page button. Simply by watching that video, it'll all kind of unfold in front of you, and it becomes extremely self-explanatory. CARD e-learning has 9 modules, and you can basically go through those at your own pace. You're going to be watching videos that are kind of like a storyboard with narration, but in addition to that, there's many different video clips of therapists actually implementing the techniques that are being described within the storyboard that you can also watch. And then of course you're able to pause, you're able to type notes right directly underneath the video that you're watching. You can save your notes, you can review them, and between each module you do take a quiz, and once you pass that quiz you can go on to the next module. And then after you complete all of them, you have a final exam. And by completing the final exam and passing with a score of 85% or better, you will be given a certificate of completion. Let me show you how easy it is to use CARD e-learning.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We're talking about the question of the day right now, which was, what is your dream vacation? Where would you like to go? I said that I newly really want to go to Scotland because I've been doing the family genealogy and have found out that I have all this Scottish heritage that I did not know about, and very much tied to a few specific castles. And then I started doing my husband's genealogy, and turns out that he also is Scottish. And I think we have to do a little bit more research, but I think it's also possible that we are like 300th time cousins removed. something weird like that. But in any case, so we've been talking lately about sometime, not this year certainly, but sometime in the future, we want to go to Scotland and check out these castles and take our son and see where we came from originally, which is very exciting. And, you know, we haven't gone, we haven't planned a trip, we haven't set a time, we haven't even started a fund for it. But I got to tell you, it makes us happy every time we talk about it. And I'm sure that we will get there, that if we've set that goal and we're going to, you know, have to apply some executive functioning skills to it, but that we will, if it's important enough, we will get that done and go at some point. But we asked you guys, what's your dream vacation? And some of you wrote it and said Scotland. So I think that's really fun. I have to be honest that before finding out that that's where my family is from, it wasn't on my list. I don't know why, because the more I find out about it, the more I think it's just really spectacular. And we did just go see Brave the other day. It was so beautiful. So I just have to say, one of the most beautiful films I've ever seen. And we certainly were watching it with those eyes of, oh, we want to go to Scotland. In any case, somebody wrote in and said, Scotland, fishing, hiking, hunting, and drinking ale with my hubby. Very interesting. Another person said going to Scotland and Ireland and staying in a haunted castle. I don't know if I have it in me to do that. I'm just going to be honest that I am a chicken, and that probably would not be on my list of things, but my husband and my child would probably be very into it. Some of the others of you said to be in an island with my loved ones and not a care in the world. Now that sounds really exciting too. Sitting on a beach in Barbados and sipping frozen drinks. That's a lovely thing. Another person who says Morocco with 2 exclamation points. And somebody else who says taking my daughter to Disneyland in Florida. She wants to eat dinner at the Princess Castle with Belle and Tiana. Wish I could take her for her 4th birthday in November. And you know, there are always other things, right? And it may be that that's what you'd like to do, but that you're choosing to do other things and focus your, time and energy on other things. But if it's something that really is a true priority, setting up your executive functions and saying, you know, here is what we want to do and how we want to go about it. Now, it may not be that it's this birthday, but it might be the next birthday, because sometimes things take longer than we want. But truly what I'm learning is that, you know, when we focus on things and we apply these rules to them, we are going to be successful at some point, if it's important enough. But there are always other things that we do choose. And there's a reason for that, right? Because we prioritize our life. And one of the conversations that I had with my son recently, when we recently were able to move from an apartment into a small house with a very small backyard, very modest, but we're able to contain our garden in the backyard, and we have a community garden plot that we were on a waiting list for and finally got. And I love to garden, so I'm getting to garden. And my son, after we moved into the house, said to me, Mom, I don't understand. If gardening is that big of a deal for you, why didn't we do it sooner? And I said, because we had more important things. And he said, but you love gardening. What could be more important than that? And I said, helping you with your autism. And he said, oh. And he said, so you didn't get to garden for a couple of years because of the things that we were doing? And I said, well, I could have. I'm sure I could have found a way to do it, but there were other things that were more important to me. And we make choices all the time. Sometimes they hurt while we're making the choices, but it's so worth it. I would trade my garden for the rest of my life, knowing the progress that my son made, right? I love gardening, but it's nowhere near as important as my kid. And I know that a lot of you, we want to give them the world, but sometimes we can only give them one state at a time. And so we do. But if Disneyland is a real priority, I know you're going to get there. I know you're going to get there, but it will be in the time that it takes for the other things that are really important to you as well. I would love to hear more of you. What's your dream vacation? Because doesn't it, I don't know, there's something about it. It makes us relax thinking about it, puts a smile on my face. Where are we going? We're going to take a short break. Speaking of where are we going, when we come back, we're going to do the academic tip of the week, teaching our children about events that happen in different times of the day. Stick with us.
Mostly the behavior started at night, but it was invading the day, where he would just speak one syllable and babble and pace around.
When she was a year old, she lost speech. She did never seem to request me for anything, even for food. He told me over the phone that I should just put her in an institution. I was devastated. What's an institution? A hospital. Yeah, isn't that nice?
He told me that it was possible or likely that Ruffin would never be employed, that he would never work productively, that he would not know that I loved him, nor would he love me, nor would he be likely to marry.
There's a 50% chance that he won't be able to talk at all, but if he does talk, he will only be able to, you know, make simple desire requests. I want, things like that. And probably by the time he was 10, he'd be in a home.
Doreen told me that he would recover, and Doreen told me that he would go to regular kindergarten.
I really have a very normal kid now, and lots of normal worries, but not extraordinary ones.
My name is Deli Popola, and I'm one of the creators of TheOutSpot.com. TheOutSpot.com is an online support system for families and specialists who are affected by autism across the whole world. Share inspirational stories, find resources in their area. Hope you can join.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters, in Tarzana, California. And it's that time of the day when we talk about the academic tip of the week. There's so many different things that are covered under the field, under the arena of academic skills, right? And we've been talking a little bit about skills today because I think it's a spectacular thing to do over the summer. In skills, they cover for academic skills up through first grade. The skills and everything else they cover up through a 9th birthday, but they cover up through first grade only. And you might think to yourself, well, I have a 3rd grader. How is this useful to me? Well, if your child is completely caught up, then that particular curriculum would not be of use to you. But I think it is the rare child in today's school system that has all of the skills completely mastered up through first grade. There are so many things that are there, right? What's interesting is to take the assessment and see where your child is behind, because it's going to save your child so much time. If your child gets to 4th grade, for instance, my son's going into 4th grade, and they don't have all those skills, it's really going to hold them back. If children don't understand quantitative sums, then doing long division and algebra really, really difficult. So I think it's really worthwhile to do the assessment to see if your child is caught up before you make any determinations about if this curriculum is good for you. But one of the different things that they have, there's 2 different domain areas. There's the math and the language arts. And one of the different sets of lessons is about activities that happen in the time of day, because they talk about calendar and telling time. And when you think about it, not only do we want our children to understand how to look at a clock and tell time, but they need to be able to link it up to and reference it with real things that happen in their real lives. So there are a set of lessons in there about learning the time of day and what kinds of things happen during the time of day, because we want to give our kids a context. So if we see that it's morning, what kinds of things happen in the morning? Well, we have the breakfast, but what else do we do in the morning? You know, we brush our teeth, we get ready day to go someplace, we go to school, we go to preschool, we do whatever it is that we do. And what happens at noon? You know, well, we eat lunch and we play on the playground, different things for different families in different places around the world, right? What do we do in the afternoon? What time do we go to bed? What time do we watch a certain TV show? What time do we see, you know, mom or dad or whoever, right? There's a whole host of things that happen at different times of the day. And we can teach this, by the way, in lots of different ways. We can teach it by using pictures of people outside of our family, real pictures or line drawings of, you know, a time of day, what happens. We can teach it by using a clock and having the picture next to it. But we also can strengthen this in a very natural environment way about, you know, anytime something is happening, especially in the summer when you got a little bit more time, saying, okay, so now it's morning, and having a little, you can get these at the dollar store, like a foam clock that has the numbers and it has the hands, and you can set the time and say, this is morning, and so this is what we're going to do in morning, and have pictures to it. So you're using it along with the visual schedule that you're doing with your child and pointing out that it's morning, and that's why we're doing these things in the morning, and now it's afternoon, and now it's evening, and now it's bedtime, and really linking those things up, that certain things happen at certain times of the day, and giving them that perspective of how these things happen and the way that they do. It's going to help your child to have an expectation of what's happening and have a heightened awareness of that they're not just being flung down a wind tunnel, right? That things happen usually, not all the time, and that we can kind of gauge what's going to happen. It actually is going to help them, for a lot of them, to reduce anxiety about what happens when. Imagine if you were on a bus and you had no idea where you were going or what time you were going to get there. How anxiety producing would that be for you? Well, for our kids, that's kind of their existence. They're on a bus. They have no idea where the destination is, when they're going to get there. That's one of the reasons why when they have the language, they say, are we there yet? Are we there yet? They don't know what it is. And they're really at the mercy of all the adults around them. But giving them a visual schedule, teaching them that certain things happen during the day, you know, we don't want to lay it in stone and make them inflexible about it, but, you know, showing them, well, these kinds of things happen during the day is going to help us to work on calendar, but it's also going to help us to have a better understanding of what's happening and for them to feel more in control. You may actually see that it lessens some challenging behavior when the child has that expectation. You gotta love that, right? So that's our academic. Take some time this summer to work on that with your child, even if it's just bringing it up and saying, you know, what time of day is it? Is it morning, afternoon, or evening? Yep, it's morning. What kinds of things do we do in the morning? Oh, we brush our teeth. We have breakfast. We go to Nana's, you know, whatever it is. And bringing it up, pairing it with things that are reinforcing and telling them what a great job that they're doing when they're realizing what the time of the day is, right? Especially if it's before an activity. You know, if your child gets to go swimming in the afternoon, what is it right now? It's the afternoon. If you can tell me what we do in the afternoon, then we'll go and do it. We go swimming, yay! And then off you go to the swimming pool. So really make it fun is my advice. All right, so that's our academic tip for the day. We are going to take a short break and come back with the myth of the week. Stick with us.
Here I stand, a man, someone who has overcome struggles, someone who has endured perceptions of what others thought of him, thinking he was stupid because he was autistic, or simply believing him to be nothing because he was different to them in their minds. But I stood my ground. I just wanted to say to the organization in general, alongside helping me to improve communicatively and socially, the other greatest gifts you gave me were the value of discipline and a good work ethic. To quote Anthony Kiedis, to celebrate you is greater now that I can. You helped me to realize that the harder you work, the likelier you are to achieve success. Having had to work very, very hard to recover from autism, this discipline has continued to serve me well. I also realized that you taught me a lot about and instilled within me a quality of having compassion and sympathy for other people. That you will be concerned more with the needs and wishes of others than with your own is something that I awe and I constantly strive to be. And In closing, the only way I can sum up CARD, all of you, is love. Everything you do to help families in need, you do out of the sheer love of wanting to make a positive difference in people's lives. And as I stand here before you as a mature adult, I have to say that I'm extremely grateful for your unwavering loving commitments to helping others in need recover from potential life roadblocks and become active and contributing members of society. While I can't overcome obstacles without a will, I cannot have a will without the love of those supporting me. And without love, I am nothing. Thanks again so very much for your love, everything that you've done and continue to do. Please give my best wishes to your families, everybody else with CARD who isn't here, and especially all of your clients and their kids. I'm confident that they too will be able to overcome, and I know that they'll be successful in what they do as long as they continue to put their minds, hearts, passions, and best efforts into it. Enough said.
I am grateful for Autism Speaks because they allow families like me to have hope.
They're working towards having these children live better lives.
There's a space for you. Yeah, there's a world for you, and there's a community that is behind you.
And one that has really been able to be the singular voice for people who are involved with and who care about autism.
I do have autism, but I don't let that become a disability for me. Autism Speaks is going to continue to help those who need it, and just look at all the stuff they've done so far and you will be impressed.
3, 2, 1.
And you need to support the walks. We have to raise awareness, but we also have to raise funds to do the work.
I'm grateful for Autism Speaks for one main reason, is they are allowing me to focus on the research.
The work that Autism Speaks has been doing is critical for keeping autism research on the radar screen.
We proclaimed 2 April as the World Autism Awareness Day. I'm very proud of the UN and thankful Autism Speaks.
Getting the health mandate bill passed in New Jersey particularly, we needed to be able to make an argument, not just do this because it's the right thing to do, but do it because it's cost effective.
When everyone else told me nothing was wrong with my son, I got information from a website that told me something wasn't right.
I am so proud of Autism Speaks for creating these beautiful ad campaigns, which have reached people who are not affected by autism and have also created a greater climate of compassion and understanding.
It's been really great for Bachman to have gotten involved with Autism Speaks early on. I think everybody here feels like they really make a difference.
To make sure that we generate as much money as we can for Autism Speaks so we can all solve this puzzle together.
There's no way we could have come this far without our families, without our supporters to date, but there's so much farther we have to go. And everybody's invited to join this cause. We need all the help we can get to make the difference we know we can make.
Welcome back to Autism Live. Thrilled to be here with you this morning talking about topics having to do with autism and being more effective and as efficient as we possibly can to help our children reach their fullest potential. It's time for our myth of the day. And we've been talking a little bit this week about the fact that there was a series of unfortunate tweets, let's say that. I'm always trying to look at things and see what's the silver lining, right? And the rap artist 50 Cent put some very objectionable and inappropriate, let's say that, tweets on his Twitter. And we talked about this yesterday, Holly Robinson Pete's response to it. And I'm hopeful that, I understand that the tweets have been taken down, and I'm hopeful that there's going to be some sort of a public apology and some sort of plan for this gentleman to rectify. You know, sometimes it takes something like this to bring attention to things. And one of the things that he said, which has to do with our myth of the day, is that he was saying to this person who had said something objectionable on his site, he said, "I looked at your picture, fool, and you look autistic." And then he further went on to say, "I don't want any special ed kids on my site, follow somebody else." And one of the things that everybody's been talking about is this idea of, is there a look to autism? And of course, I guess that there are some people who are out there who think that there is a look. It's a myth. There isn't. I think we all understand that if somebody is affected with Down syndrome, that there is a look associated with Down syndrome, right? But with autism, there isn't. And I think at times it's part of the frustration for parents is that, while I don't think we wish that there was a look associated with it, is that our children are there and that sometimes they're not seen because there isn't a look to it. I know I have said on many occasions to people that I have been talking to and having a difficult time talking to, you know, if my child was on crutches or in a wheelchair or needed a ramp in order to be able to do this, we would not be having this discussion, would we? But the fact that it is not visible on my child does not mean that you can decide not to serve him, right? And you know, and again, I don't think any of us is wishing that there was a look associated with autism, but on the other hand, it is something that makes it difficult for people to recognize that our children are there and they need the help and support of the entire community. So double duty inappropriateness on Mr. Fitty's plate, because he's wrong. There is no look to autism. I believe that he was using the term in complete and total ignorance, and he meant it as a slur. It certainly was taken as a slur. It's inappropriate in either way, but it does demonstrate extreme ignorance about autism. The thing about ignorance is that it is always a choice. Always a choice. And if you have the choice to be educated and get educated and be a part of the solution, you can. And it is my extreme hope, and we have put a formal invitation through to 50 Cent's people offering if he would like to come on here and make a public apology and address how he is going to help our community to turn this around. I think that that's a wonderful way that he could approach this. But it does require apology, right? We say that to our kids. It's not enough to apologize, but it's the place where you start. But there is no look to autism. You can't look at a picture of a child and recognize autism. There are times when we look at pictures of our children and we recognize a moment in which they disconnected, but you cannot look at a picture and diagnose and say autism. You cannot look at a child and say, okay, autism. So it is certainly, it's false. There is no look to autism. But that does not change the fact that it is a very real thing. A very real thing, and that our kids deserve our consideration, our respect, and our best. And we hope that people who have the ability to have a voice, who can make a difference, choose to use that power in a way that is positive and well-meaning and helpful instead of to denigrate and make worse. That is what we hope. That's kind of a dream vacation, isn't it, in and of itself? All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we are going to talk about the social skills tip of the week. Stick with us. Hi, welcome. I'm here with Sue Cho, and Sue, tell us what you do.
I'm a senior clinical supervisor, and so I provide supervision to children in some of our clinics, and I also am a trainer for CARD, and so I provide training for all the supervisors that are either learning to be a supervisor or current supervisors, and I also provide workshop services to children all over the U.S., Caribbean, Europe, South Africa, and Asia.
Very cool. And you're here today to talk with us about teaching prepositions.
Yes.
Help us to know how we can teach this.
Okay, so when you're teaching prepositions, there are a variety of ways that you can teach it. When you're teaching your first several targets, you want to make sure whatever you teach has a distinct front and a distinct back. Probably go with simpler and then more complex when you're teaching your beginning targets. One way you can do it is always have the same item to use as your reference point. You can also do it where you're constantly changing your reference point. So maybe within a sitting I decide now I'm going to use a truck, or I'm going to use a box, or I'm going to use a chair. But that also depends on how flexible the child you're teaching is with learning with multiple items. This lesson is actually a little more on the abstract side. So if you find that your child's having difficulty with lessons maybe such as attributes, that you may want to start off where you use multiple objects as your reference point. So I use a helmet, I use a chair, I use a car, but I never turn the position of the item.
Right.
And so once they learn if the item is in the same position where the object goes, then you can start turning your item or putting the child in a different position in relationship to the item.
So you start with receptive, though, where you're asking them to do it. They're not having to say anything, they just have to demonstrate their knowledge of it. Then how do you teach the expressive? How and when?
So what we do is then we'd probably work on manding so that the child can request for the position. Let's say the child wants a particular color, but we're not working on colors. We're actually trying to work on prepositions. So I have a yellow block on the top. I have 2 white cars, but maybe there's a slight distinction, and they want the one that's in front of the helmet. So then they would have to say in front. So then they get the one that's in front.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Or when you're asking about tacting, at first I start off and I say, where is the block? And the child says, on top. I have some children that actually have a really hard time learning it receptively. I try to make them motivated to ask for a position then.
And how do you motivate them to ask for the position?
You want to put things there that you know that they like.
It seems like one of the keys to this is having really preferred items to do the exercises with.
Definitely, definitely. Because they're more likely to pay attention too then.
Welcome back. And so you can see the therapist on that last clip was working with the child on the prepositions and she put something behind the house, next to it, on top, and we couldn't hear her, but she was saying which one is on top, and then the child takes the one that's on top. But again, is my understanding of this and how it works best is when we use really preferred items, that makes it more interesting and fun for the kids. It's confusing. I always say too, my favorite thing to work on prepositions with is the book Go Dog Go. It's a P.D. Eastman book, and it covers all the prepositions in one book, so it's a really fun thing to do. Hey, it's time for our social. I feel like we're going through all of the different areas because we didn't get a chance to earlier in the week, but it's time for our social skills tip of the week, and I want to talk a little bit about eye contact because it's important, right? It's important that we work for good eye contact. And did you notice that I said good eye contact? We're not just going for eye contact, right? We don't have that staring at you but not seeing you kind of thing, and my eyebrows are raised and I look a little like I might do something dangerous, right? We want eye contact that's natural. We look away, we think, we go back and talk. That's the kind of eye contact that we want. It isn't going to be easy for our kids to start with, but it is something that we can make reinforcing. And I think that it's beneficial to notice in yourself first. How much do you make eye contact? When do you make eye contact? When do you look away? What does it feel like for you when you make eye contact? When do you make the choice to make eye contact? because we do choose at different times to make eye contact. And a lot of times, I think some people already look at it this way and other people don't, that quite honestly, we choose to make eye contact on things that we want to power pack, right? There is something incredibly intimate. There is something powerful about making eye contact. There is a little surge of electricity sometimes when you make eye contact with somebody, and not just somebody that you're in love with, but you know, you make eye contact with your child and you're really talking to them. There's just, it's powerful, right? Imagine if somebody could turn up the dial on that to the point where it was just uncomfortable. Have you ever been in that situation where you've made eye contact with somebody and it seemed uncomfortable? Well, you know, we don't know all the reasons why it's hard for our kids to make eye contact, but I imagine that there is, you know, that for them, because so many other sensory things are dialed up, what if that's part of it, right? But the thing about it is that if we give them enough opportunities, whatever the reason why they're having difficulty making eye contact, if we give them enough opportunities and we make it rewarding enough, we will see more eye contact happen with the child. You know, we've said this week when we're teaching language that in order for the child to get anything, we're going to ask them to demand in one way or another, whether we're pointing to a picture, whether they're gesturing, whether they're using a vocal approximation to request it. We're not going to give up the thing until they've done something to let us know that they want it. So if they want a cookie, we might start out with pointing that they want the cookie, and so we're going to give them the cookie because that's a form of demanding. It's a gesturing. Then later on, we might, you know, say, no, you know, you got to make, you know, we're going to teach them this is the sign for cookie, because you can point at something and still not get it right. If the child is across the room and they're pointing and going, you have the possibility of being wrong. We want it to be efficient. We want it to be effective. So then we teach the sign for cookie, and the child goes, we say, what? You know, what do you want? The child goes, oh, cookie, give the cookie, right? Well, we can also do this with eye contact, that the things that we want, we only get if we make the eye contact. I've told the story before on the show about my son, and that he had no eye contact when we started ABA. None whatsoever, didn't respond to his name, didn't turn his head, didn't stimulus orient. All of that had gone away. We'd had it, and it all went away. But they looked at my individual child, and this is what you have to do with your child, and go, what really flips your child's switch? What is the most reinforcing thing to them? What really gets them going? For my son then, and really, I guess, as of yesterday, still the case of, you know, what is the most exciting thing is pirates and sword fights. Oh my goodness. And my son finds space really reinforcing, but I guess pirates and sword fights still win. And he as always, his first thing that he ever loved was a video of Peter Pan, of the stage show that they did on A&E with Kathy Rigby, which I mentioned that we got to take him to the live version of it last fall. It is on tour right now. If you get a chance to see it, oh my goodness, you're missing it if you don't go to it, okay? And I know it's round and about, and it's coming back to the Los Angeles area, I think in January, but in any case, oh, don't miss it. It's such a treat for the whole family. And my son loved to watch that video. Boy, if he was having a good day and wanted something, he wanted that video. If he was sick, that was the video he wanted. He would go and get it out, and it was the thing he wanted to watch more than anything else, and he just loved it. And so when we started at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, we had to fill out papers about what kinds of things did our child like and love, and then so they had some prior information, and then the therapist came and spent some time with him and played with him to see. And very quickly, Peter Farrig, who was the first therapist who ever came to our door, saw this, and I had shared with him, oh, you know, loves the Peter Pan video, loves the Peter Pan video. And so he quickly saw a way in. And this is how we do it. We find what is really reinforcing for the child, and it's our way in. It's like the little chink in the armor, right? We wiggle our way in, and the chink gets wider and wider and wider until the armor falls off. So he wanted to get eye contact with my son, and he wanted to get rapport with my son, and he wanted to teach my son that making eye contact was fun. So they would make paper swords. Every day they'd come and I had a stack of construction paper and Peter would sit there and he wouldn't cut it out with scissors because they were afraid of paper cuts, so he would tear it. Really thinking, right? They would tear the swords out of paper and they would start, my son would have one and Peter would have the other sword, and they would start to fight, right? But sometimes Peter would just freeze. He wouldn't say anything, he wouldn't do anything, but he would freeze and be staring at Jem. And he would do nothing, so he didn't ask for eye contact, but he would just wait until, and Jem is like looking and going, I don't understand what happened. This was really exciting. Where's the start button? Right? And it took him a little while, but at some point he would glance up and just for a second his eyes would cross Peter's and Peter would start again. He would just start again and start the sword fight again, and my son would be thrilled. He didn't know what worked, but it thrilled. And then Peter would freeze again. After, maybe 45 seconds, he'd freeze again, making eye contact with my child who's not making eye contact, right? And my son would, he would like prod Peter in the leg and push the hand, and he'd try to do things, and Peter wouldn't respond until his eyes crossed Peter's again. Peter would get switched back on and he would do the sword fight again. And it didn't take long at all. It was very slow moving, very patient, but within a couple of days, my son got it. He figured it out for himself and realized, you don't start again until I look at your eyes. So then he would do it. And as soon as he would do it and Peter would start again, Peter would say, good eye contact. Good eye contact, dude. And they would play and play and play, and then he'd freeze again, and my son would look at his eyes. Good eye contact. So now he's labeling it, but he wasn't in the beginning. My son didn't have enough receptive language for anybody to say eye contact and to him to know what an eye was. He didn't know what eyes were. We might have well have said, blah, 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 right? He wasn't getting it. And Peter didn't wait for that to build his receptive skills. He just only switched on the ride when he made the eye contact. So stop and think about your child. What does your child find uniquely reinforcing? What would they, crawl across the floor to get close to? What do they want? Is there any kind of interaction that they want? It can be as simple as, they've got their favorite dog and you're playing with the dog and you're tickling them with the dog, the stuffed dog. I'm not talking about a real dog here. And then the stuffed dog goes behind your back, right? And the child is looking for the dog and you're just making the eye contact and waiting in the second. And sometimes they're not even making eye contact, it's just that their eyes pass by yours. It doesn't matter. Bring it out. Great. If you keep doing it, eventually the child figures out that this is what works. This is what works. And so I am going to make eye contact. And it's not a fully formed thought in their head, but it's behavior. And that's what we're going for, is the behavior, the behavior, the behavior. So that eventually, after Peter had paired the eye contact with saying good eye contact, the praise for it, then we got to a point after a period of time where they would say other prompts to him like, you got to look at me, or give me your eyes, or look here. Not always the same way, right? But building in, and whenever he did look, he got big praise. He got tickles, he got bubbles, the game continued, the play continued, whatever it was. Really reinforcing it every single time that he did it. Now, we don't reinforce him anymore for eye contact. His eye contact is usually very good. Every once in a while we'll have a day when it's not as strong as it is, where he's talking to me and he's looking someplace else. And then I have to remind him, I have to say, you got to look at me. And usually it's a day when he's having trouble focusing on a lot of different things. He's got a lot of different stuff going on. And on those days, we kind of bring it right back to the basics, right? About making eye contact, reinforcing it. But those days are rare anymore, rare and few and far between, and a lot of times it's right when he's coming down with something. I've shared the story before, it's irony at this point, but I've shared the story before about taking him when he was 4 to a birthday party at one of those huge warehouses with all the inflatable slides and zip lines and music blaring. You want to talk sensory overload. I can't stand to go there, because for me it literally makes me dizzy. It's just blowing air, noise, kids screaming. Whew, too much for me, right? But he loves that kind of thing, loves the birthday parties, and he would run up to the top of the slide and come down. And of course, you give your kids rules and you say, here are the kinds of things you have to do, and people take turns. But people were kind of messing with the rule structure, right? So there'd be a parent with a very small child who would need more time, and so they would sit down on the slide, big, wide slide, right? Those inflatable ones. And so she would sit down with her child, and she would be telling children, go ahead, go down, because we're going to wait a minute. So now we get into fuzzy rules, right? And so my son is not doing a good job, so he thinks, oh, the rules have all changed. He was 4. And he goes, oh, in his head, oh, the rules have all changed. When I get to the top, I get to go. I don't have to wait for the other people, except then there were other kids, little kids who weren't with a parent who you needed to wait for them. So I was trying to, each time he'd come down the slide, I would pull him over and I would say to him, now listen, you know, you only get, here's a new rule, you only get to jump ahead in line if somebody says it's okay. Otherwise, if they don't say go ahead, you have to wait for them. And that's a difficult concept for a 4-year-old with autism. And so he would be looking over here and nodding his head. I'd say, do you understand? And he'd be looking over here. And I would say, no, dude, you got to stop and you got to look at me, right? So then he would kind of look, because there's a lot going on, right? And he would look at me and I'd say, do you understand? Yes, Mom. Okay, so he'd go back up and he, you know, kind of mess it up a little bit, right? He didn't have it down yet. Well, it takes a few times, right? Well, eventually, another mom is sitting down at the bottom and she says to me, is he sick? And I said, I'm sorry, what? Does he have a cold? And I said, no. And I'm thinking, why is she asking me this? I have no idea. Like, you don't walk up, I don't know this person, we're at a birthday party together. This is not your opening salvo normally when you're starting conversation with another mom and a birthday. And I said, no, why would you ask? Well, you know, because he wasn't looking at you and you were having to tell him to look at you. And, you know, that's a sign that a child's getting a cold. And I thought, oh, because in your world, that's a sign that a child gets a cold. In my world, it's a sign that a child has autism. But, you know, thank you for your input. And then, of course, he came down another time and she came over again and said to me, I think your child's getting sick and he should not be at this party. You know, he's going to infect the other children. And, of course, I'm being an autism mom, and so I was really not happy that, you know, she's saying, you know, the fact that your child, I understood that she was saying that my child probably had a cold. And I had been kind in her ignorance, but now I'm getting ticked, right? And I said to her, look, my child does not have a cold. He's not getting a cold. My child is recovering from autism, and that's why he's having a hard time making eye contact. And she, of course, turned and looked at me and said, autism? Your son doesn't have autism, right? This is one of those know-it-all moms. And I said, yeah, no, he's recovering from it. He's doing hard work. And she goes, oh, well, you would never know. Right. That's what you were seeing with the eye contact, though, right? And here we are, irony of ironies, on days when he can't make eye contact with me. Now, it's usually that he's starting to get sick. But you know what? If this is my worst problem of the day, I'm doing pretty well. In any case, I've digressed greatly, but the point is that our kids can make eye contact if we make it reinforcing enough for them, if we are patient, if we give them plenty of opportunities. And there are hundreds of times a day when we can work on eye contact and we can reinforce it. You always want to pair it with praise, because what we're hoping to do is back off from the other reinforcements as quickly as possible and have it maintained with praise, because eventually we're going to back off of that as well. Obviously, you're not going to send your child off to a job interview and hope that they're going to make eye contact and the person doing the interview says, hey, nice eye contact, right? It's not a realistic expectation. But we've got years to work towards that, and so we can very slowly pair it with something really reinforcing in the beginning. You can start to fade that after you have appropriately paired that praise with it. And then eventually you can begin to fade the praise. I think be really careful physically prompting. For a while, when my son was finding it really difficult because he really wanted to look at things and had a hard time focusing his attention, we were putting our hands up next to his face and saying, dude, you got to look here. But then, you know what he would do when he was trying to get our attention, he would do that to us and put his hands up. And we found that that didn't work well with friends. be careful about how often you use any kind of a prompt because you will teach it to your child. So that's eye contact. We have a special little treat for you right now because it's Friday. We showed this to you a couple of weeks ago. It is the TED Talk with Temple Grandin. She's an amazing, amazing individual, and we really try to make Friday something that's inspirational and especially reinforcing because you showed up here with us. So we want to show you this tape. Take a look at Temple Grandin, and we'll be back on the other side. Stick with us.
I think I'll start out and just talk a little bit about what exactly autism is. Autism is a very big continuum that goes from very severe, the child remains nonverbal, all the way up to brilliant scientists and engineers. And I actually feel at home here because there's a lot of autism genetics here. You wouldn't have any... It's a continuum of traits. When does a nerd turn into, Asperger, which is just mild autism? I mean, Einstein and Mozart and Tesla would all be probably diagnosed as autistic spectrum today. And one of the things that really is going to concern me is getting these kids to be the ones that are going to invent the next energy things, that Bill Gates talked about this morning. Okay, now if you want to understand autism animals, and I want to talk to you about different ways of thinking, you have to get away from verbal language. I think in pictures. I don't think in language. Now, the thing about the autistic mind is it attends to details, okay? This is a test where you either have to pick out the big letters or pick out the little letters, and the autistic mind picks out the little letters more quickly. And the thing is, the normal brain ignores the details. Well, if you're building a bridge, details are pretty important because it'll fall down if you ignore the details. And one of my big concerns with a lot of policy things today is things are getting too abstract. People are getting away from doing hands-on stuff. I'm really concerned that a lot of the schools have taken out the hands-on classes because art and classes like that, those were the classes where I excelled. Okay, in my work with cattle, I noticed a lot of little things that most people don't notice would make the cattle balk. Like, for example, this flag waving right in front of the veterinary facility. This feed yard was going to tear down their whole veterinary facility. All they needed to do was move the flag. Rapid movement, contrast. In the early 70s when I started, I got right down in the chutes to see what cattle were seeing. People thought that was crazy. A coat on a fence would make them balk. Shadows would make them balk. A hose on the floor. People weren't noticing these things. A chain hanging down. And that's shown very, very nicely in the movie. In fact, I loved the movie how they duplicated all my projects. That's the geek side. My drawings got the star in the movie, too. And actually, it's called Temple Grandin, not Thinking in Pictures. So what is Thinking in Pictures? It's literally movies in your head. My mind works like Google for images. Now, when I was a young kid, I didn't know my thinking was different. I thought everybody thought in pictures. And then when I did my book, Thinking in Pictures, I started interviewing people about how they think. And I was shocked to find out that my thinking was quite different. Like if I say, think about a church steeple, most people get this sort of generalized, generic one. Now, maybe that's not true in this room, but it's going to be true in a whole lot of different places. I see only specific pictures. They flash up into my memory just like Google for pictures. And in the movie, they've got a great scene in there where the word shoe is said and a whole bunch of 50s and 60s shoes pop into my imagination. Okay, there's my childhood church, that's specific. There's some more, Fort Collins. Okay, how about famous ones? And they just kind of come up kind of like this, just really quickly, like Google for pictures. And they come up one at a time, and then I can think, well, okay, well, maybe we can have it snow, or we can have a thunderstorm. I can hold it there and turn them into videos. Now, visual thinking was a tremendous asset in my work designing cattle handling facilities. And I've worked really hard on improving how cattle are treated at the slaughter plant. I'm not going to go into any gucky slaughter slides. I've got that stuff up on YouTube if you want to look at it. But one of the things that I was able to do in my design work is I could actually test run a piece of equipment in my mind, just like a virtual reality computer system. And this is an aerial view of a recreation of one of my projects that was used in the movie. That was like just so super cool. And there were a lot of kind of Asperger types and autism types working out there on the movie set too. But one of the things that really worries me is where's the younger version of those kids going today? They're not ending up in Silicon Valley where they belong. Now, one of the things I learned very early on, because I wasn't that social, is I had to sell my work and not myself. And the way I sold livestock jobs is I showed off my drawings, I showed off pictures of things. Another thing that helped me as a little kid is, boy, in the 50s you were taught manners. You were taught you can't pull the merchandise off the shelves in the store and throw it around. Now, when kids get to be in 3rd or 4th grade, you might see that this kid's going to be a visual thinker, drawing in perspective. Now, I want to emphasize that not every autistic kid's going to be a visual thinker. Now, I had this brain scan done several years ago, and I used to joke around about having a gigantic internet trunk line going deep into my visual cortex. This is tensor imaging, and my great big internet trunk line is twice as big as the controls. The red lines there are me, and the blue lines are the sex and age-matched control. And there I got a gigantic one, and the control over there, the blue one, has got a really small one. And some of the research now is showing that people on the spectrum actually think with primary visual cortex. Now the thing is, the visual thinker is just one kind of mind. You see, the autistic mind tends to be a specialist mind, good at one thing, bad at something else. And where I was bad was algebra. And I was never allowed to take geometry or trig. Gigantic mistake. I'm finding a lot of kids that need to skip algebra, go right to geometry and trig. Now, another kind of mind is the pattern thinker, more abstract. These are your engineers, your computer programmers. Now, this is pattern thinking. That praying mantis is made from a single sheet of paper. No scotch tape, no cuts, and there in the background is the pattern for folding it. Here are the types of thinking. Photorealistic visual thinkers like me. Pattern thinkers, music and math minds. Some of these oftentimes have problems with reading. You also will see these kind of problems with kids that are dyslexic. You'll see these different kinds of minds. And then there's a verbal mind. They know every fact about everything. Now, another thing is the sensory issues. I was really concerned about having to wear this gadget on my face. And I came in half an hour beforehand so I could have it put on and kind of get used to it. And they got it bent so it's not hitting my chin. But sensory is an issue. Some kids are bothered by fluorescent lights. Others have problems with sound sensitivity. You know, it's going to be variable. Now, visual thinking gave me a whole lot of insight into the animal mind. Because think about it, an animal's a sensory-based thinker, not verbal. Thinks in pictures, thinks in sounds, thinks in smells. Think about how much information there is there on the local fire hydrant. He knows who's been there, when they were there, are they friend or foe? Is there anybody he can go mate with? There's a ton of information on that fire hydrant. It's all very detailed information. And looking at these kind of details gave me a lot of insight into animals. Now, the animal mind, and also my mind, puts sensory-based information into categories. Man on a horse and a man on the ground, that is viewed as two totally different things. You can have a horse that's been abused by a rider. They'll be absolutely fine with the veterinarian and with the horseshoer, but you can't ride him. You have another horse where maybe the horseshoer beat him up, and he'll be terrible for anything on the ground with the veterinarian, but a person can ride him. Cattle are the same way. Man on a horse, a man on foot, they're two different things. You see, it's a different picture. See, I want you to think about just how specific this is. Now, this ability to put information into categories, I find a lot of people are not very good at this. Like when I'm out troubleshooting with equipment or problems with something in a plant, they don't seem to be able to figure out, do I have a training people issue or do I have something wrong with the equipment? In other words, categorize equipment problem from a people problem. I find a lot of people have difficulty doing that. Now, let's say I figure out, is an equipment problem, is it a minor problem with something simple I can fix, or is the whole design of the system wrong? People have a hard time figuring that out. Let's just look at something like, you know, solving problems with, you know, making airlines safer. Yeah, I'm a million-mile flyer. I do lots and lots of flying. And you know, like if I was at the FFA, what would I be doing a lot of direct observation of? It would be their airplane tails. You know, 5 fatal wrecks in the last 20 years. Tail either came off or steering stuff inside the tail broke in some way. It's tails, pure and simple. And when the pilots walk around the plane, guess what? They can't see that stuff inside the tail. You know, now as I think about that, I'm pulling up all of that, you know, specific information. It's specific. See, my thinking's bottom up. I take all the little pieces and I put the pieces together like a puzzle. Now here's a horse that was deathly afraid of black cowboy hats. He'd been abused by somebody with a black cowboy hat. White cowboy hats, that was absolutely fine. Now the thing is, the world is going to need all of the different kinds of minds to work together. We've got to work on developing all these different kinds of minds. And one of the things that's driving me really crazy as I travel around and I do autism meetings is I'm seeing a lot of smart, geeky, nerdy kids. And they just aren't very social. And nobody's working on developing their interest in something like science. And this brings up the whole thing of my science teacher. My science teacher is shown absolutely beautifully in the movie. I was a goofball student when I was in high school. I just didn't care at all about studying until I had Mr. Carlock's science class. He was now Dr. Carlock in the movie. And he got me challenged to figure out an optical illusion room. This brings up the whole thing of you got to show kids interesting stuff. You know, one of the things that I think maybe TED ought to do is tell all the schools about all the great lectures that are on TED. And there's all kinds of great stuff on the internet to get these kids turned on. Because I'm seeing a lot of these geeky, nerdy kids, and the teachers out in the Midwest and other parts of the country, when you get away from these tech areas, they don't know what to do with these kids. And they're not going down the right path. The thing is, you can make a mind to be more of a thinking and cognitive mind, or a mind can be wired to be more social. And what some of the research now has shown in autism is there may be extra wiring back here in the really brilliant mind, and we lose a few social circuits here. It's kind of a trade-off between thinking and social. And then you can get into the point where it's so severe, you're going to have a person that's going to be nonverbal. In the normal human mind, language covers up the visual thinking we share with animals. This is the work of Dr. Bruce Miller, and he studied Alzheimer's patients that had frontal temporal lobe dementia. And the dementia ate out the language parts of the brain, and then this artwork came out of somebody that used to install stereos in cars. Now, Van Gogh doesn't know anything about physics, but I think it's very interesting that there was some work done to show that this eddy pattern in this painting followed a statistical model of turbulence. This brings up the whole interesting idea of maybe some of this mathematical patterns is in our own head. And the Wolfram stuff, I was taking notes and I was writing down all the search words I could use, because I think that's going to go on in my autism lectures. We've got to show these kids interesting stuff. And they've taken out the auto shop class and the drafting class and the art class. I mean, art was my best subject in school. We've got to think about all these different kinds of minds, and we've got to absolutely work with these kind of minds, because we absolutely are going to need these kind of people in the future. And let's talk about jobs. Okay, my science teacher got me studying because I was a goofball that didn't want to study. But you know what? I was getting work experience. I'm seeing too many of these smart kids that haven't learned basic things, like how to be on time. I was taught that when I was 8 years old. You know, how to have table manners at Granny's Sunday party. I was taught that when I was very, very young. And when I was 13, I had a job at a dressmaker's shop selling clothes. I did internships in college. I was building things. And I also had to learn how to do assignments. You know, all I wanted to do was draw pictures of horses when I was little. Mother said, well, let's do a picture of something else. They've got to learn how to do something else. Let's say the kid's fixated on Legos. Let's get them working on building different things. The thing about the autistic mind is it tends to be fixated. Like if the kid loves race cars, let's use race cars for math. Let's figure out how long it takes a race car to go a certain distance. In other words, use that fixation in order to motivate that kid. That's one of the things we need to do. And really get fed up when the teachers, especially when you get away from this part of the country, they don't know what to do with these smart kids. It just drives me crazy. What can visual thinkers do when they grow up? They can do graphic design, all kinds of stuff with computers, photography, industrial design. The pattern thinkers, they're the ones that are going to be your mathematicians, your software engineers, your computer programmers, all of those kinds of jobs. And then you've got the word minds. They make great journalists, and they also make really, really good stage actors. Because the thing about being autistic is I had to learn social skills like being in a play. You just have to learn it. And we need to be working with these students, and this brings up mentors. You know, my science teacher was not an accredited teacher. He was a NASA space scientist. Now, some states now are getting it to where if you have a degree in biology or a degree in chemistry, you can come into the school and teach, biology or chemistry. We need to be doing that. Because what I'm observing is the good teachers for a lot of these kids are out in the community colleges. But we need to be getting some of these good teachers into the high schools. Another thing that can be very, very, very successful is there's a lot of people that may have retired from, working in the software industry. And they can teach a kid. And it doesn't matter if what they teach them is old. Because what you're doing is you're lighting the spark. You're getting that kid turned on. And you get them turned on, then you'll learn all the new stuff. Mentors are just essential. I cannot emphasize enough what my science teacher did for me. And we've got to mentor them, hire them. And if you bring them in for internships in your companies, the thing about the autism, Asperger kind of mind, you got to give them a specific task. Don't just say design new software. You got to tell them something a lot more specific. Well, we're designing software for a phone, and it has to do some specific thing, and it can only use so much memory. That's the kind of specificity you need. Well, that's the end of my talk, and I just want to thank everybody for coming. It was great to be here. Okay. Oh, you have a question for me?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. You once wrote, I like this quote, "If by some magic autism had been eradicated from the face of the earth, then men would still be socializing in front of a wood fire at the entrance to a cave."
Because who do you think made the first stone spear? It was the Asperger guy, and if you were to get rid of all the autism genetics, there'd be no more Silicon Valley, and the energy crisis would not be solved.
So I want to ask you a couple other questions, and if any of these feel inappropriate, it's okay just to say next question. But if there's someone here who has an autistic child or knows an autistic child and feels kind of cut off from them, what advice would you give them?
Well, first of all, we got to look at age. If you have a 2-, 3-, or 4-year-old, no speech, no social interaction, I can't emphasize enough, don't wait. You need at least 20 hours a week of one-to-one teaching. The thing is, autism comes in different degrees. There's going to be about half the people on the spectrum that are not going to learn to talk, and they're not going to be working in Silicon Valley. That would not be a reasonable thing for them to do. But then you got these smart, geeky kids, the touch of autism, and that's where you've got to get them turned on with doing interesting things. I got social interaction through shared interests. I rode horses with other kids. I made model rockets with other kids. Did electronics lab, with other kids. And in the 60s, it was gluing mirrors onto rubber membrane on speaker to make a light show. That was like, we consider that super cool.
Is it unrealistic for them to hope or think that that child loves them, as some might most wish?
Well, let me tell you, that child will be loyal, and if your house is burning down, they're going to get you out of it.
Wow. So most people, if you ask them what are they most passionate about, they'd say things like, my kids, or my lover, or... What are you most passionate about?
I'm passionate about that the things I do are going to make the world a better place. When I have a mother of an autistic child say, my kid went to college because of your book or one of your lectures, that makes me happy. The slaughter plants, I've worked with them in the 80s. They were absolutely awful. I developed a really simple scoring system for slaughter plants where you just measure outcomes. How many cattle fell down, how many cattle got poked with the prodder, how many cattle are mooing their heads off. And it's very, very simple. You directly observe a few simple things. It's worked really well. I get satisfaction out of seeing stuff that makes real change in the real world. We need a lot more of that and a lot less abstract stuff.
When we were talking on the phone, one of the things you said that really astonished me was, you said one thing you were passionate about was server farms. Tell me about that.
Well, the reason why I got really excited and I read about that, it contains knowledge. It's libraries. And to me, knowledge is something that is extremely valuable. So maybe over 10 years ago now, our library got flooded, and this is before the internet got really big, and I was really upset about all the books being wrecked because it was knowledge being destroyed. And server farms or data centers are great libraries of knowledge.
Temple, can I just say it's an absolute delight to have you at TED.
Well,
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Autism Live. What a wonderful inspiration Temple Grandin is. I don't think it matters who you are, whether you have a child on the spectrum or not. She is amazing. She's absolutely amazing, and what she's been able to accomplish in her life, I'm thrilled for her, especially the fact that HBO decided to do the movie and to see what that did for her. The recognition that she got for it. Now, she was somebody who was already famous, and she was somebody who had already flown all around the world and had several best-selling books, right? But to see that the pride with which she told her story, and every time there was an awards show and they would talk about her and she would stand up and she would wave, and you could see that there was an amount of pride that she was standing up and claiming who she was in a way that was brilliant. As a mother, I loved that, that there was no part of her that felt like and certainly if you watch the movie, you see that she was very much a part of the making of the movie, by the way, but you see that there are moments when this young woman is desperately trying to fit into this world that moves at a different pace and sees things in a way that's different for her, and it's confusing and it's frustrating and difficult, and it really, while our kids will look at things in different ways, and they don't all think and process things like Temple Grandin, I think that as our kids come to awareness, as they start to improve, the double-edged sword is that they start to come back into the world, but when they do, they start to notice, oh my goodness, I am not the same as everyone else. And that is something that they have to come to acceptance on. And I don't think it's vastly different for everybody else in the world, because I think that everybody is unique and individual, and I think that teenagers in particular, particularly whether they're on the spectrum or not, is a poignant time of coming to know who you are and to recognize that you're different from everybody else, to come to acceptance with that. And for young people who can, what a much happier, productive life they can lead. But I do think it is especially difficult for our kids on the spectrum. And because the awareness tends to be, not always, but tends to be very heightened for kids who have Asperger's, that they have the potential to be brilliant, brilliant enough to see complex social problems and understand solutions to them, but to be able to see, I am different and I can't seem to negotiate how to fit in to this very different world. How particularly painful and poignant that was. So for me as a parent to see Temple Grandin at a point where in her life where she was standing up and making no apologies and saying, I am worthwhile, I am different, I do not fit in with the way that the masses do, it is okay, I am here, I have led a great life, I am leading a great life, look at me, and it's fabulous, and I'm not going to attempt to make any excuses for it at all because I shouldn't, was just a lovely, lovely thing. I really love the way she separates the thinking, and I think it's a great clue for all of us, not only to how we think, but how our children think. This idea that there are these three. What's interesting is that years ago, I saw her speak in a different forum, and she was talking about the different ways of thinking, but she used a different word than pattern thinking. She was talking about concept thinkers, and it was very interesting to me because she talked about how she, I See in Pictures was her first big book, and I remember even before I've shared before that when I was a teenager, my awareness of what autism was, there was a young boy who lived just one house behind us in Kitty Corner who was very profoundly affected by autism, was nonverbal and was an escape artist, and he would frequently wind up on my mother's porch steps. He was much younger than I was, but he would come. My mother had built a porch onto the front of the house and put a porch swing, and he would come and swing on her porch swing, and whenever she would see him, she would yell to one of us, or one of us would see him. Somebody would yell to somebody in the house and say, he's on the porch, call his mother, and my mother would keep a roll of butter rum lifesavers on her desk. She would grab them and go sit with him, because if you came to sit with him and didn't have the butter rum lifesavers, he would run away. But she would sit with him and she would give him one butter rum lifesaver at a time and swing with him until his mother could run over. And I remember, that's all I remember about him. What I remember about her was she was this beautiful young woman, and I watched her age, like literally before my eyes as a teenager, because she was constantly in this fear of her child escaping, and she would come running through the backyards and screaming, is he still there? Is he still there? Because the fear was that, you know, he had just slipped away and disappeared. And I just remember as a teenager going, man, her life is hard. Funny how things in your life go. And so that was my awareness of autism. But I can remember reading a part of, I think it was when I was still a teenager, reading an excerpt from I See in Pictures of Temple Grandin talking about when she was a child and how visually things would be frightening to her because she couldn't understand them. And thinking, wow, and here she had gone on and gotten her degree and had this incredible life as an architect for systems for cattle. And I remember looking at that and going, what, and again, as a very young person, not understanding autism, going, what is the difference between these two people? That here is this boy who's never going to speak, who doesn't have any contact with the world except through the butter rum lifesavers that I am aware of. And here is this woman who is speaking, and, you know, what's the difference? And thinking about the two moms. Very interesting that then, you know, autism really didn't touch my life until a college friend's child was diagnosed, and it was halfway across the country, and I wasn't really aware of that. And then my child was diagnosed. And I think about those early thoughts that I had about autism all the time. But in any case, watching a couple of years ago Temple Grandin talk about these 4 ways of thinking, and she talked about the visual, and I always had looked at I See in Pictures and thought, well, that's not all that remarkable. I see in pictures too. That's exactly how I communicate with the world and what I see, and I think the same way. Somebody brings up shoes and my head brings up all these different shoes, and you know, and then I pare it down to the kind of, that's exactly how my brain works. So I didn't think it was all that remarkable that her brain worked. I was like, well, what's the big deal? But when I became a teacher, I began to realize that everyone doesn't see in pictures. And then I have this child, right? And I was thinking, well, you know, Temple sees in pictures, so my son must see in pictures, so we're going to get along great. This isn't going to be a problem, but it was. It was very much a problem. I would talk and I would frustrate my son to the point of tears. When I was telling him how to do something, when I was trying to teach him something, he would just go rigid and be, you know, I could just see there was frustration and anger, and I couldn't understand it. And then I watched Temple speak, and she talks about the 3 different things. At that time, she was saying visual and conceptual, and talking about how some people with autism see things in this 360-degree arena, that they can flip it over, turn it around, and they have the ability to manipulate the image in a way that is intense, but that they need to know what the concept is, and that they can create great concepts, but if you're explaining something to them, you have to come at it from an understanding of not showing them a snapshot, because that doesn't fit into their 360-degree global thinking. And that made me as a mother go, aha. I was also comparing it to the fact that my son at one point was watching a commercial, and it was the first clue that I really saw a little bit of how his brain worked. It was a commercial that showed, you know, in a design space, a virtual design space, how it's a grid, that it's just a grid all the way around. And they were showing a car, but first the transmission, I think the drivetrain came down. It just like came down and was hanging in this space. And then eventually a car, you know, a truck body came down on top of it. But when there was just this empty design space, and then the drivetrain came down, and my son like got up off the couch and was standing, like he leapt into the center of the room towards the television and looked at that, and he said, "What is that?" And I said, "I don't know," because I didn't recognize what it was. And then the truck cab came down on top of it, and he said, "It's a truck! It's a truck!" And he was jumping up and down like a jumping bean, and he was just, you know, like Wallace and Gromit, excited about it. "It's a truck! It's a truck! That's what's inside a truck!" And he was so thrilled. Like I'd never seen all the lights come on like that before, and I thought, oh my goodness, because he would design Legos, and he would have a picture in his head of what it was he was going to do. And he wasn't completely verbal yet, but this was like a year before this moment watching TV. I remember him coming to me and waking me up. He had gotten up, and I hadn't heard him get up, and he was building Legos, not with a pattern, not with a book. He just had a pile of Legos, and he was building them. And he came to me, and he woke me up, and he said, Mama, need red undergripper." And I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, what?" And he was articulating as hard as he could, "Need red undergripper." And I didn't know what he meant at all. And he was pointing to the Legos and showing me, and he kept on saying, "Need red undergripper." And I had no idea what that meant. And then he went through all of the little booklets that we had that came with all the kits that he would never use, until he found a picture of a Lego that attaches, you know, to the underneath of something, and it has a little clip that can grip something, a red undergripper. Because in his head, he had already spec'd out all the pieces that he needed to build a fire truck that he was building that didn't have a pattern. And he could see it in his head. And I could, you know, from him saying red undergripper, and I thought, well, what else would you call that thing? It is a red undergripper, right? But this is a little boy who wasn't fully verbal yet, right? And so very, very interesting. And with that knowledge, with Temple talking about the conceptual thinkers, and I went, my child can't see what I see because his picture is in 3D and he can flip it. And I'm giving him a two-dimensional picture that means nothing to him. And so I changed the way in which I talk to him. I give him the full concept of everything. So that if I say, you know, if he says, "What are we doing?" and I know that there's a stream of things that we're going to do, I start out with the concept of, we're going to have a day where we're really busy. And he goes, "Oh, okay." And then I can say, I can subcategory it down a little bit and say, he says, "How many things?" "We got 10 things to do." Right? Okay, now he's got that concept. He's got it a little bit more fleshed out. And then I can go into individual things. But if I say, you know, well, we're going to the birthday party, you know, he has a hard time. If I'm going to teach him something, I got to start from the concept and then whittle it down to the individual thing, so that it's not this two-dimensional picture that I'm presenting to him. And recently, on Mother's Day, they brought me breakfast in bed, and they brought my gifts in bed, and we were sitting there, all of us, on my husband and my bed, and my son was there, and my husband had his smartphone, and he showed us a picture of a man holding a handful. It looked like a huge handful of strange-looking flowers from a distance, right? And as you looked closer at it, it was an armload of kittens lined up like a bouquet. And the caption said, "Florist was closed, hope you like kittens," right? Well, we laughed and laughed and laughed at the picture. And my husband just flashed it to us for a couple of seconds, and then he put the phone down, and we opened presents and did all these things. And then at one point, I said something about, well, this was much better than getting 42 cats. And Jem looked at me and he said, 42 cats? It was 12 cats. And I said, well, it was probably somewhere between 12 and 42. Because in my head, I just, you know, I'm picturing a bunch of cats, right? And Jem said, no, it was 12 cats. And I I said, get the phone. I want to know if it's exactly 12 cats. And Jem said, it is. It's 12 cats. And I said, how do you know? He said, well, because I counted them. And I said, you counted them? That's what you were doing when you looked at the picture? He said, no, I counted them just now. And I said, well, you weren't looking at the picture just now. And he goes, but I can see the picture. And I counted them. And sure enough, we looked at the picture, there were 12 cats. And I said to him, you know, how do you look at the picture after the fact and count them? And he said, oh, well, I can move the cats around in the picture. So I took them out of his hands and lined them up so that I could count them. And it was the first time. He's 9 now, and he was 8 at the time. It was the first time that he could verbalize to me and say, this is the way my brain works. And that I could verbalize to him and say, I can't do that. I can't take a picture of it and manipulate it. I can take a picture of it sometimes and see it, but I can't see details like he can, and I can't manipulate it. And he said, you can't? And I said, no. And he said, well, can most other people? And I said, no. And he said, oh. Oh, like, well, that explains it. I had no idea that no wonder. And it's been a very interesting couple of months. And I love how Temple couches it all so that we see that people, like, when she does the example of the horses, and that horses are categorizing things, and that sometimes when there's a sensory issue, it's about something really specific. The horse who wouldn't react if somebody had a white hat, but if they had a flat top hat that was any other color, the horse would react negatively because it had categorized that. And I remember a couple of years ago when there was the Japanese tsunami, I guess that was just a year ago, a little over a year ago, that there was a blog actually for Blogging for Autism where they interviewed Temple Grandin about her life and different things. And she brought it, it's actually a recording of her talking on the phone with the interviewer. And you can find it on Blogging for Autism. But at one point, she brought it up and said, you know, the world needs people who are autistic because we see things in a way that the rest of you don't. And we don't all see them in the same way when we have autism, but we see things in a way that the world can benefit from it. And she said, take, for instance, this nuclear power plant in the Japanese tsunami. If a person with autism had designed that, it would never have happened. She said, I can picture it right now in my mind, how the water breached the seawall and went in, and where they had placed the reactors in a way that they left themselves danger for that. She said, I can guarantee you if I designed that, that would never have happened. You gotta love it. You gotta love it. So in any case, what a wonderful thing for us to be able to spend some time talking about on a Friday. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we have some more fun stuff for you, so stick with us. Hi, we're here today with Cecilia Knight, who is the Director of Training for the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. And today I'm thrilled to have her here because we're going to talk about manding. What is manding?
A request that you would make of another person.
Why is manding one of the first things that seems to come up in most programs?
Okay. Well, a baby requests for his mother's attention by crying or by reaching. And so it's one of the first ways that you let another person know what you need. And then that other person reinforces you by either picking you up or giving you something to drink or something to eat. And so many of our clients aren't really good at that once we start a program with them. And unfortunately, many of them engage in inappropriate manding. Screaming, kicking, biting. And so what we're trying to do early on is no longer reinforce the inappropriate ways of asking and rather reinforce the appropriate ways of asking. And as we teach them an appropriate way to ask for, Mom, play with me, can I have juice, or, even more simply, help, then we see those inappropriate demands decreasing. and the appropriate man's increasing, because the child's wants and their desires aren't really changing, but we're teaching them the right way to get their needs met.
So manding doesn't have to actually be spoken. It can be nonverbal as well.
And that's exactly right. They could exchange an icon. And if I bring you an icon with a cup on it and hand it to you, and you bring me a juice cup, then we've made an exchange. And so there is what Skinner would call verbal behavior. You have reinforced my request for a cup or for juice.
So when we say verbal behavior, we're not talking about vocal behavior necessarily.
That's right.
It's just that it's a conversation of some sort.
What is reinforcing to the child? The man is evoked by the child's desire or their need for something. So early on, we may arrange the situation where I know that they're interested in the juice and they're reaching for it. I may hold it back to just say juice or ja or whatever is appropriate for that child. And then as soon as they emit any sort of response, give a high level of praise and then immediately give them the juice. But what controls the demand is that specific reinforcer. So of course, if the child asks for a juice cup and you bring something else, then they're not being reinforced with what they asked to have.
Okay.
What do you want?
Wait for job. You say wait for please. Wait for please. Good talking. Thank you, Dad. Thank you, Daddy.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. We just spent a large part of this hour watching the TED talk that was done by Temple Grandin and talking about that. We've talked about teaching language and how important it is, and shown you a lot of different clips this week about teaching language and how we can be more effective and efficient. And we've tried to give you an idea of the amount of progress that our children can make and the skills that we can teach them, right? But we started out the week and today talking about what ABA is. Increasing behaviors we want to see more of. Language is certainly going to be in that category, right? And socialization and executive functions and all these social skills, eye contact, we want to increase all of those. But the other part of this equation is decreasing behaviors we want to see less of. So I want to just end this week with a little bit of a talk again about challenging behavior and how we go about decreasing challenging behavior. I think it's a good note to end on, because when we get both of these things going, right? If we're here on challenging behavior here and skill level is here, and if we can flip that, man, everything gets better. Life gets better. Food tastes better. Sleep is more possible. Life is manageable, right? And when challenging behavior is here and skills are here, it's rough. On everyone. It's rough on the child, it's rough on the parents, it's rough on the family, it's rough on any kind of outing. Everything becomes insurmountable. So we really want to talk about flipping them. We've spent a lot of time talking about increasing skills. Let's take a few minutes to talk about decreasing challenging behavior. And of course, one of the things that we always like to remind you that behavior is a means of communications. It's just a way that your child is trying to communicate to you. So take a look at these pictures and look at these kids, and it's easy when it's not our own kid, right? It's easy when it's not our child feeling the pain or feeling the anger, right? But we look at these kids' faces. Look at that baby. I love that baby. What are they communicating? And it's not, we can't tell just from the picture, but it's 100% clear to us while we are sitting here and at ease that these children are communicating something. We may not know what it is, but there is communication happening here. And we want communication. We just want a better means of communication, one that's actually efficient, because making that face is not going to be 100% clear. We're going to have a margin of error when we're trying to figure out what's wrong, right? Logic dictates, science proves that behavior is only maintained when it's rewarded in some way. So stop and think about this. This is that thing Dr. Phil says, what's your payoff? If you're doing this over and over and over again, you're getting some kind of a paycheck from it, what is it? And when our children are engaging in challenging behavior over and over and over again, there is some sort of payoff. If your child is sitting and doing this, it's not random. There is a payoff for them. If they are biting themselves, there is a payoff. If they're biting you, there is a payoff. If they're biting the dog, there is a payoff. We need to begin to figure out what is the payoff. If we can figure out what the payoff is, then we can come up with a really effective strategy to change the behavior. Okay, so is this a tool that we can use knowing about it? It absolutely is. What if we can pick the behaviors we want a student or a child to maintain and make them rewarding? So, you know, for a child to talk, we're gonna make it as rewarding as possible, and the behaviors that are challenging, we're gonna make it less rewarding. So if your child is biting you, and you figure out what the payoff is, and if you can make it not have a payoff biting you, your child is going to stop biting you, right? It makes total sense. So how do we go about that? Applied behavior analysis. The ABCs of behavior. We talked about this before, but keep in mind, we can only change a child's behavior after we've changed ours. We've got to look at this in a different way. We've got to apply the tools. We can't just expect it to magically morph into something else, right? This expectation of, oh, he'll grow out of it, or oh, she'll grow out of it, right? We're not doing that. That's not working. If that were the case, we wouldn't be having such a hard time, right? Don't listen to people, oh, they'll grow out. Yeah. No. ABCs of behavior. The A is the antecedent, the B is the behavior, the C is the consequence. Remember this morning we talked about the fact that we don't have a whole lot of control over that B, but we have a whole lot of control over the antecedent. We have a whole lot of control over the consequence. We talked about this the other day, that every single behavior, it has its paycheck, right? It has some sort of reward. So we want to figure out what the reward is. And the way we go about doing that is that we have somebody do an FBA, a functional behavior assessment. They look at the behavior from a 360-degree perspective and say, why is this behavior happening? Right? What is triggering it, and how is it being maintained? What is the reward? And you got to look at it from that 360-degree view. So you're thinking to yourself, all right, how do I do an FBA? Well, especially if it's challenging behavior, you don't. Practice doing an FBA on yourself. Ask yourself what all the behaviors that you do, why are you doing them? What's the behavior that, what happens that triggers it? What's the behavior, and what's the consequence for the behavior? Think about some of the things that you're doing that you like doing, that you want to continue doing, like brushing your teeth in the morning. Why are you doing it? What happens in the morning that triggers the behavior that you go to brush your teeth, and what is the consequence? Now, there are long-term consequences to brushing your teeth, but usually we don't step it up for long-term consequences unless we power pack it with smaller consequences. So what's the short-term consequence for you brushing your teeth? What is it? Because you get up and you do it every morning. So why are you doing it every morning? Is it because your teeth feel gross? Is it because you don't like the feeling of being embarrassed when you're talking to people and your breath is bad? You know, there's some immediate consequence for you. For me, it like wakes me up and I feel better, and everything is better after I've brushed my teeth. I like it. It's a pleasurable feeling for me, so I'm going to do it every morning. And then think about some of the behaviors that you're engaging in that you wish you wouldn't. Why are you doing that? What triggers it? What's the actual behavior? What triggers it? And what's your payoff for it? I know a lot of people are out there who are smoking and they say, I don't want to smoke. I wish I wasn't smoking. Well, what triggers you having a cigarette, and what's the immediate consequence for it? It's fascinating to hear why people, when they can pare it down and really get to the truth of what the payoff is for a cigarette. For some people, it is, they say, oh, it's relaxing. There's nothing relaxing actually about smoking cigarettes except for taking a big inhale of breath and a big exhale of breath. For those people, if they would just take their coffee break and instead of going and having a cigarette, inhale deeply and exhale deeply, they would get the payoff that they want without all the tar and nicotine, right? For other people, it's social time, that's what's reinforcing, that they get to go get away from work, stand with a group of people, have discussion, and have social time, and that's very reinforcing for them. If we set up a circumstance where they weren't smoking that was more social than that, they would be less likely to be smoking. I know that there is a chemical component to cigarette smoking, but you can get past it very quickly. That in the beginning there is an actual physical reaction, but I think that they say that it's like 4 days that leaves the body, and that then it's just the behavioral stuff, that you're no longer addicted to the chemical. And then you just got to deal with the behavior, right? So think about and do FBAs on yourself. But where your child is concerned, that is not a place for trial and error, especially with challenging behavior. Get a BCBA. BCBA is going to look at it from a 360-degree angle, and they're going to come up with an intervention plan that suits the function of the behavior. We talked yesterday about the fact that there are the 4 main suspects, right? Attention, escape, access to someone or something, and things that are automatically reinforcing. Those are our 4 main suspects. You go, I'm going to guess. I got a 25% chance that I'm going to be right. Well, when it comes to your child and your child's safety, really? We're not going to do that, right? There's no guessing, because when you guess, you run the possibility of making it worse and putting your child in danger or putting somebody else in danger. So we definitely don't want to do that. Let's say that the child is biting, and we make the assumption, because the child is biting mom, and we make the assumption that the child is biting for attention. And we say, okay, then the intervention plan, we're always going to come up with a replacement behavior. We're never just going to say, don't do that, and expect for the child to give up the thing that they wanted. That's not going to work, right? So if we've said, okay, the child is doing this for attention, we're going to mess with the antecedent a little bit, and we're going to shower this child with tons and tons of attention in hopes that they don't have to bite in order to get the attention. And if they do, and we're going to try to block so that they can't bite mom, but if they do bite mom, we're going to say that mom is not going to give any big reaction to it. Mom's going to move away, not say ow, not talk to the child and say, why did you just do that? You hurt mommy, right? No attention. Cut off the supply of the reinforcement for it, right? And if in fact this behavior is maintained by attention, doing the antecedent and showering the child with attention and not giving attention for the behavior that we don't want to see is going to change this, and change it very quickly. But let's imagine that we've guessed and said that it's attention, and it's not. That the reason why the child is biting mom is because they've got something going on with their teeth, where their teeth are itching, they're teething, and it feels uncomfortable, so they're biting mom. Well, now our intervention is that we're going to shower them with attention, right? And if they bite mom, we're not going to give it any attention. Mom is going to be very busy blocking, because this child is going to continue to bite. Right? All the attention in the world is not going to change the fact that this child is going to bite, and mom might get hurt in the process. Or the child's going to go, if mom's like busily trying to block, the child's going to go and bite something else. The child's going to bite the dog. Maybe the dog's going to bite them back. The child might bite into something that's electrical. This is not something to be messed with. Now, if we have the BCBA come in, the board certified behavior analyst, and they look and say, no, this child is biting because it's self-reinforcing. It feels good to bite. This child has got a physiological thing going on. Their teeth are cutting and they need to bite. Then instead of showering the child with all this attention and ignoring when they bite, we're going to do something entirely different, and we're going to give this child a more socially acceptable way of feeding this need to bite. We're going to give them a biting ring. We're going to give them a toy that it is okay for them to bite, and teach them when you need to bite, this is what you bite. My son for a while had this, and he had a necklace that was called jewelry, right? And it looked like this really cool yin and yang black and white thing, and when he would need to bite, because he was on a medicine that literally would make his gums itch, he would take it at school and bite into this toy. And in the beginning, we would praise him for this so that he learned I'm not biting myself or somebody else or my shirt or my pencil or something that could eventually hurt me, but I'm biting this thing that is completely non-toxic, safe, ordered just for this thing. And that intervention worked. And we were able to fade it out over time. My son's not walking around with a necklace, right? It was just a period of time that he had to get through it, but he needed to bite. Imagine if I had just poured all this attention onto it and said, oh, attention, 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 then he's still biting, right? Not effective. So we need to know what the function is in order to get to the best possible intervention. By the way, if you, and we've been talking about skills a lot today because I think it's incredible, if you have skills, there is something called Behavior Champ that goes with it. And if you get the function of the behavior, it helps you to design the intervention. Tells you, reminds you of all the antecedent modifications that will go with it, all the consequence modifications that will go with it, and reminds you to put a replacement behavior, because you always have to give a replacement behavior. That moment when our child's doing something annoying like kicking the seat in the doctor's office and we're saying, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, always give a replacement behavior. Instead of saying to the child, don't do that, ask the child to do something else where they can't be kicking the chair. Say, hey, could you come over here and help me with something? And now the child's not kicking the chair. Much more effective than saying, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. Not gonna work. All right, I feel like we just ran through that. But I want you to know that we can change these challenging behaviors. That's what I want you to know. And I want you to know that we can grow other skills. And that when we do these two things, when we flip, the challenging behaviors become much less, if not go away, and we increase the skills, we get into the good part of life with our individual children. We get to enjoy them. We get to see who they are, not what this disorder is, right? We get to see who they are, what their sense of humor is, what they want to do with their life. We get to hear what they want to eat for lunch. We get to converse with them about really important things and how they think, and hear how they look at a picture and how they make sense of it. That's when the good stuff really starts to happen. These are tools, and we can use these tools to make a difference in our children's lives. Okay, as this show ends, the conversation continues. We're going to start to scroll through some of the different ways in which you can get a hold of us. Even over this long weekend, Autism Live will be playing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on autism-live.com. And you can be getting a hold of us and all the experts that we've talked to via email. You can call us and leave a message for us over the weekend. You can call and make an appointment to Skype in with us next week. We absolutely love it when we have an opportunity to Skype with you. You can interact with us on Facebook throughout the weekend. I know that I am on there from time to time, and you can friend me and like our Autism Live page and contact me through both of them. I don't live on it because I got a kid, I got a family, but from time to time I check in. You can also tweet with us at Autism Live Show, and you can also be watching us in lots of other ways. You don't have to just watch us on autism-live.com, because while we're here 24 hours a day, you can't specify what it is you want to watch. If you want to watch a specific episode, like Angela Persicki was yesterday talking about toileting, you're going to be able to watch that on Blip TV, and other experts on a variety of subjects, including toileting. You can watch us on YouTube. We have our own channel there. You can be checking out the A Word on YouTube as well. You can be downloading us for free on iTunes, and of course, you can always watch us on Ustream.com. All of those different ways. We hope you'll take advantage of it. We hope you'll write in, tell us what you need. We want to support you. You are not alone. I know it feels like it sometimes, but you're not. There are so many people who are on this journey with you, and I am one of them. And there is help for your child, not a bunch of other kids that we don't know. There is help for your child. There is hope for you and your family. A day can come when you can go out to the store and know that it's going to be okay. Stick around, learn what you need to learn, ask what you need to know. We want want to help you. We're going to be back on Monday at 9 a.m. and we've got some really exciting things to talk about with you on Monday, so you won't want to miss that. Until then, please give your kiddos a hug from me. Bye-bye for now.